I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome back, guys. We're going to get things started with our special guest tonight. But first and foremost, I am going to go ahead and show you the topics that we're going to discuss tonight. We do have a big show. We have quite a bit to discuss, and we will do call in after the show, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and run through what we're going to discuss tonight. Tonight, we are discussing, if you have not seen this, this is absolutely awesome. Jeffrey Sachs' epic speech at the European Parliament. That is a big story. We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Diddy's warrant challenge. There is something happening with the Diddy case that some of you may not be aware of, which could change everything. We're also going to discuss the Elon email upset towards federal employees and what is happening with that now. We're also discussing Amanda Seales checks Don Lemon about the Democratic Party. We're going to get into that, ladies and gentlemen. And this is probably a big story as well. Germany elections, and what does that mean for the future of Europe? That's a big one. We're also discussing with our guests JFK expose. This is a big one. And we also have a bonus story, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Rachel Maddow. If you've not heard about this, I already covered the firing of Joy Reid, posted that video yesterday, but there is more information that has come out about that, and Rachel Maddow has some things to say. So it's going to be a pretty busy show, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a bit to discuss. Let's go ahead and bring in our special guest. Tonight, we are bringing in Ken McCarthy. He is the author of JFK and RFK versus Zionist extremism. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So, Ken, I'm really interested to hear about this. For those who are not aware, if you're a newer viewer, there was a journalist that came onto this show about a year ago. His name is Rick Sterling, and he was the one that kind of woke me up to how JFK actually felt about Israel and the fear of Zionism and what it would become. And now we have Ken McCarthy here, who has written a book about this. And Rick Sterling, you tell me, is one of the contributors. So I want to dive in here a little bit. What is something you think that a lot of people may not be aware of when it comes to JFK and RFK, not RFK Jr., you guys, but JFK and RFK, and what they were afraid of would happen with Israel before their timely demise?
Well, I think the most important thing to know is this is the best kept secret in American history, what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. I mean, nobody knows this stuff. And there's two basic questions. Who is JFK, which may seem like a silly question, and who are the Zionists, which also may seem like a silly question. But I'm going to answer that right now. JFK, I wrote a book previous to this that sort of was a setup for the new book. Here it is, JFK, Anti-Imperialist. It's little known. We know when we ask who was JFK, people will say, well, he was a handsome guy. He was a young guy. He had a beautiful wife. He had cute kids. He was assassinated. Nobody knows who did it. And then if they're a little educated, they'll say, well, there was some kind of Cuban Missile Crisis. If they're really educated, they'll say he was trying to get us out of Vietnam. And that's it. If you think about it, if you ask 99 people out of 100, that's all they're going to be able to tell you. He was a staunch anti-imperialist in the 1950s when he was a senator in Massachusetts. Twice he went out on a limb and fought against imperialist behavior on the part of the French coincidentally during the Dien Bien Phu battle, which was sort of the final battle of the French Indochina War. Coincidentally, he was on the floor of the Senate saying, hey, we should not be supporting the French and what they're doing in Indochina. He also gave another speech supporting the, for lack of a better word, rebellion of the people of Algeria against the French. Now, there was no political capital to be earned for a senator from Massachusetts in the 1950s speaking against our ally, the French, and speaking on behalf of Muslim Arabs in Algeria. He did it. All right. I don't think 1 out of 10,000 people in America knows this aspect of his history. So when we look at JFK, he's in the tradition of anti-imperialism, along with Mark Twain, believe it or not, Andrew Carnegie, Grover Cleveland. They were all members of something called the Anti-Imperialist League. The anti-imperialist feeling in the United States has been suppressed very heavily in the 20th century, and John F. Kennedy was bringing it back. That was one of the things he was doing. So this is John F. Kennedy. Now, who are the Zionists? And I think we always need to say this, even though it's probably obvious to all the listeners. Zionists are not Jewish, okay? Zionists are Zionists. They are a member of a political ideology, right? So you can be a Jewish Zionist, you can be a Christian Zionist, you can be an atheist Zionist. And this is very important, and hardly anybody knows this. In the 1930s, you could be a fascist Zionist. In fact, many Zionists were proud to call themselves fascist. That's now out of style, obviously. But there was a great deal of friendship between fascist Italy and the Zionist ideologues. Why? Because the Zionists looked at how the Italians dealt with the Ethiopians, bombing them, starving them, setting up concentration camps, and said, we like the way you guys deal. Maybe we can do business together. Mussolini and the Zionists were allies. He actually admitted over 100 Zionists to the Naval Academy of Italy. So this is something hardly anybody knows. JFK was against fascism, okay? Kind of obvious. During the summer of 1963, he was very concerned that the Zionists were developing nuclear weapons in their atomic lab in the Sinai. And by the way, a lot of these documents are only just recently released. Talk about secret documents, right? Unreleased documents. But they're all released now. We have them in the book. We have the actual text. Nobody needs to believe me or trust me or anything. We have the actual text. We even have the photocopies of the cover page of every one of these documents. We have the links straight back to the National Archive. There's no dispute. John F. Kennedy was locked in a secret battle against the Zionists in Israel, against them developing the atom bomb. They really, really, really wanted nuclear weapons. He really, really did not want nuclear proliferation. Now, remember, when a lot of people don't know this or never were taught it or forgot, he was against open-air nuclear testing and succeeded in getting a test ban signed by multiple countries. This was a massive accomplishment, and it was the beginning of an effort that he was making to first stop the open-air test ban, then stop testing, then stop new weapons, and then start dismantling the weapons. That was his long-term plan. So the last thing he wanted were more countries, Israel or anyone else, to develop nuclear weapons. And he was on them about this. And we have the telegrams, the cables, the letters, and the various prime ministers of Israel were hemming and hawing and delaying and obfuscating. He wanted it stopped. And in one of these documents, he warned them. He said, if we don't get in there and see what you're doing, this is going to affect your support that you're getting from us. I mean, he was crystal clear about it. Meanwhile, his brother, who was Attorney General, that was Robert F. Kennedy Sr., was fighting the Zionists on another front. They didn't want to follow the lobbying registration laws in the United States. It works. Is if you're a foreign nation and you want to lobby in the United States, you want to run ads, you want to talk to senators, you want to host conferences, you can do all that. But you have to register. We have to know where the money's coming from. We have to know how you're spending it. And it's so strict that if 3 or more people gather on the behalf of your nation and you're the lobbyist, you have to report the meeting and its contents to the State Department. So, foreign lobbying is allowed, but for good reason, we keep a very, very careful eye on it because it lends itself to corruption very easily. So and I call them Zionists. I'm not calling them Israelis. I'm certainly not calling them Jews. They are Zionists. They are members of what I call a homicidal, larcenous cult, political cult. And they did not want to have to follow the foreign lobbying laws. And Robert F. Kennedy Sr. was pressing them hard to follow those laws. Okay. Again, nobody has to believe me. We have all the documents, all the letters, the cables, the telegrams. It's all in the book. It's black and white. It's incontrovertible. The other thing that's incontrovertible is in November of 1963, John F. Kennedy was murdered. And in essence, that took his brother out as well, temporarily. So this is American history, folks, that I guarantee not 1 out of 10,000 Americans is even vaguely aware of.
Well, really quick, speaking of that, this is something that RFK Jr. will never mention. When he was running for president, he didn't mention, and he talked about, of course, obviously RFK Sr., and he also talked about JFK, but he wouldn't mention this. In fact, he said the exact opposite. RFK, when he was running for president, he said that his family has always stood with Israel and he stands by them as well. Totally left this part out of the conversation. And I think that, that gives people room for pause. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that RFK?
Oh boy, this is a hard one. And, I worked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the Real Anthony Fauci book. My research was cited 28 times in that book, and I'm also thanked personally in the acknowledgments. So this was a shocking, disappointing, and horrifying turn of events to see his stand. Why he's doing it, I don't know. I always have hope that at some point, whatever trance he's under, he's going to shake himself out of. But he's clearly not. And by the way, I know my book was in his hands because I shipped it to him via Amazon. I got the little photograph showing that it was on his front door. And one of his oldest, closest friends and writing partners, who's also a little concerned about his position, I sent it to him and he hand delivered it. So he's got this material in his hands. I'm hoping, he's got a lot on his plate right now. I want him to win in what he's working on now, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shocked and disappointed by his position.
Very interesting. If you're just joining us, this is Ken McCarthy. He is the author of JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionist Extremism. It looks like here, obviously, you can find this on Amazon. This is very important, I think, for people to hear. Someone just mentioned this in the chat, and I have my opinion about this, but I want to hear what you have to say. Elwin says, why we didn't hear nor were taught in school. Why weren't we taught about this in school? Why wasn't this in the history books when we learned about JFK and we learned about RFK? I have my thoughts about that, but I want to hear your opinion.
Well, it goes even deeper. So there's a whole community of assassination scholars, right? Assassination research, and they've generated mountains and mountains and mountains of research. They never mention the number of Zionists that are implicated in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. They're just never mentioned. So not only is it not in our history books, but even in our so-called alternative research, they are for some reason leaving out the Zionist angle. Now, I'm not saying Israel killed Kennedy, but there were absolutely Zionists, American Zionists in particular, who were really deeply involved in the plot to kill Kennedy. And you hardly ever hear their names. One of them is James Jesus Angleton. And I'm wondering how many Americans have ever even heard that name. Okay. Angleton was so beloved in Israel that there are not one, but two memorials to him. And he was he was the director of counterintelligence for the CIA for 20 years. And during the period of JFK getting assassinated, and during the period of RFK and MLK, and I think Malcolm X, he was the man. And what is counterintelligence? To make it simple, he's the guy that's supposed to keep all the secrets and make sure everything that's done is done secretly. That's what counterintelligence is. And he held that position, just like J. Edgar Hoover held his position for decades, and Anthony Fauci held his position for decades. This Zionist, and by the way, he was probably anti-Semitic, and this is like going to blow people's minds. He was a WASP. He went to Yale, and there was a whole attitude among that class of people. But he was a Zionist ideologue, as was Winston Churchill. So there's a lot of people that are not Jewish, who are not even necessarily religious, who like the idea of fascist-minded people placed in the Middle East to do our bidding. So that's just one of the guys who here's how involved he was with the assassination and the cover-up. There was a man who was the head of CIA and the station chief in Mexico City. When that man died, and he was sort of making a little bit of noise, like he didn't fully trust the official story. When that man died, James Jesus Angleton personally got on a plane, flew to Mexico City, and browbeat that man's wife into being able to go into his library, clear out all his papers, clear out all the copies of his memoirs, and put them on a military plane back to the United States. That's how involved this fellow was in the cleanup operation. And again, this man was considered a Zionist by the Israelis, by the Zionists. He has 2 memorials to him. He's implicated in helping steal nuclear material that ended up in the Zionist nuclear weapons program. I mean, it's pretty bad.
It's very interesting. And so I live here in Massachusetts. And so the Kennedys are very well known here, of course. And a lot of them still do live in Massachusetts. And I can tell you guys, even if you go to the JFK library, obviously this information is not there at all. And there were a couple of, there was a director and a producer that came onto the show a while back, and they produced a documentary called 4 Died Trying. And it was about JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. And they talked about something that they all had in common, which is that they were all anti-imperialist, right? So These are the people that they really did try back then to sound the alarm and to get away from these wars, get away from imperialism. They really did try back then. And all 4 of them were killed. And that brings me to the point. I want to fast forward to the video that you sent me about the sense of, or the lack of humanity when it comes to Gaza.
Yeah.
And how widespread that was until October 7th. And I don't think that even corporate media expected the response that they received when the protests started. I think Biden administration admitted this as well. Like they didn't know how to respond to that because they didn't expect that to happen. More people have woken up about the creation of Israel and what's really been happening to the Palestinian people. I want to hear from you a little bit more about that. How is it that the Palestinian people, particularly the children that have been killed in Gaza, how is it that for so long they've been able to be dehumanized?
Well, a world-class propaganda program that's been going on for decade after decade after decade. And, if you look at the way Muslims people are slandered, it's unbelievable. If you sit back and look at it, you never see Muslim people presented in a positive light ever. The only time they're ever presented is as terrorists. And, all groups have terrorists. There are Christian terrorists, there are atheist terrorists, there are socialist terrorists. It's obviously a minuscule. There may be a few thousand Muslim terrorists in the whole world. Well, there's over 2 billion Muslim people. And these are, for the most part, God-fearing, devout, very good people. We never, ever, ever, ever see that in this country. So that's it's kind of the way Africa is portrayed, right? The only time we ever see Africa is either there's some, civil war going on and, horrors of war, or we see people starving. We never see people doing productive things or being scientists or being doctors or being engineers. And It's the dehumanization always precedes genocide. So it's been a multi-decade dehumanization program.
And that's a really good point, because I remember after 9/11, I do remember there was a lot, excuse me, a lot of Islamophobia in the country at that point in time. And if they are able, and by they, I mean the media and the government, if they're able to convince you that these are bad people, you're less likely to feel some type of sympathy for them, even when you look at something like October 7th. And I think what has really changed is a lot of the younger people are like, no, we know the truth. We know about what really happened to them. We know they're being occupied. We know what's really going on. And I think that sometimes I wonder, like, if JFK had lived, imagine that if he lived.
He never in a million years would he have tolerated this. Remember, okay, in the 1950s, he's a young senator. The Algerians are fighting for their independence, and the French were nasty. They killed in the scope of their colonization period, which is about 150 years. They killed 1/3 of all Algerians. They massacred villages. They starved people to death. They put people in concentration camps. They did all the horrible things. What did JFK do? He got on the floor of the Senate as a young man representing Massachusetts and said, "This is wrong. We cannot support this." There's one other element, and nobody has ever seen this, unless you go to YouTube and search it, and you'll find it. When Algeria finally threw off the French and elected their first president, JFK invited the new president of Algeria to come to the White House. Now, they didn't just sit in chairs and get some photographs. They took over the entire backyard of the White House. It was a red carpet. They had honor guards from all the different armed forces, and not like 2 guys with a flag, like 20 guys from each military. They had all the top brass. They had all the top. I mean, this was one of the most lavish receptions for a foreign leader ever held at the White House in the history of America. JFK was sending a message to the world about how he wanted the U.S. to look at our Arab and Muslim brothers. This is a big thing. Everybody can find this video on YouTube. You can just look it up. It's unbelievable when you see it.
And then this goes back to the source of the information that is presented in front of us, because the reality is, and I remember when I was in school, the history books say one thing, right? I always tell people you have to do your own research. You can't just go by what is said in the history textbooks. This is also true for the Black Panthers as well. I mean, when I was in school, we were taught that the Black Panthers were militant people that wanted to overthrow the government. They didn't tell us that the Black Panthers were feeding people and, built like community centers and clinics. They didn't tell us any of those things. Those are things that I had to learn from family members, from people who were alive during that time. And so I think that's another point that I want to mention, is that the narrative isn't just controlled by corporate media. It's also controlled in the classroom.
Absolutely.
And if you don't take like that extra step to learn more, then you'll be completely brainwashed. You'll be completely in the dark.
And everybody should look up who Fred Hampton was, and everybody should look up how Fred Hampton was murdered. If you want, I mean, and how could that, I got to say this. I wait for the BLM. I wait for every year. I wait for the BLM people on the memorial of Fred Hampton's death to say something, and remind people of who this beautiful young man was and what they did to him. And he was a Black Panther. That's why I bring him up.
Yeah, very, very young age, but very intelligent and knew exactly what was going on and how to help people, and the way that they took him out. And we can point out people like J. Edgar Hoover, who now there is, pushback where more people are starting to say, I don't think we should have these buildings named after J. Edgar Hoover, like how he went after people and all this. But again, in school, I wasn't taught those things about J. Edgar Hoover. I was taught that he was a great guy.
I was taught that if we didn't behave in school and we got a bad record in our file and we ever wanted to work for the FBI, I'm telling you, I was actually taught this. They would come, see our bad marks in the file, and wouldn't hire us. That's the crazy world that I was raised in.
And it's interesting when you think about the Kennedys in general, because I do feel like someone that is not as talked about as much is Ted Kennedy. Even Ted Kennedy, remember, he primaried Jimmy Carter, right? And he didn't win, but he did win some states during the primary. So for those who are, I think a lot of people that are like my age or younger, it kind of, if you look back at all the states that Ted Kennedy won, no, he didn't win the primary, but that sent a strong message. And I feel like against a sitting president, and notice we did not have that again, right? Like there were people running against Joe Biden and the DNC said, no, we're not going to have like an actual primary or whatever. And I think a lot of it was because of what happened when Ted Kennedy ran. And people to this day argue that him challenging Jimmy Carter weakened Jimmy Carter's position going into the general election. And that's why he did not win re-election. That's what some people still argue. But when you look at the Kennedys as like a whole, there's so much like wrapped in here. Ted Kennedy, another one I've brought up before, that there was the incident where he was with the woman. I believe this woman worked for him at the point in time. I forget her name. We're talking about Chappaquiddick.
But that whole, you got to dig deep into that. There's a lot of shady stuff behind the scenes that it's a very complicated story, and I wouldn't believe a single aspect of it. We could have a whole show on that.
For people who don't know, this woman died. Ted Kennedy, this is the part of the story I know. Ted Kennedy was drinking and driving, and there was an accident.
Really, honestly, believe me, when you dig way deep into this story, there's some really weird stuff going on behind the scenes. He may not have been guilty of anything. It's a long story. It's a long story.
Interesting. So it almost brings it poses this question: was JFK supposed to win, in your opinion?
You mean win the next election?
Was he supposed to become president at all?
I mean RFK Jr. or RFK Senior?
JFK. Going way back. Like, do you think that JFK? Do you think that like the establishment or like the deep state?
Really, he's a very, people are going to find this comparison weird, but he's not like Trump. I mean, they're very different guys, but the dynamic is very similar. What people don't know is Joseph Kennedy, the father, was not just a rich guy. He was at the level of a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk. He was uber rich, and he had a machine. He wanted his sons to be president. One of them died during the war, and then John was the next one up. And he had a lot of juice behind him, and he basically put John F. Kennedy in the White House. Without his father, there would be no JFK in the White House. No way in the world that have ever happened. That was not a spontaneous outpouring. That was a very clever man with a lot of money, who, by the way, was the master of Hollywood. People don't understand. JFK's father is the guy that modernized Hollywood financially. So he knew everything about image creation and making stars. And, just think about it. Kennedy died, it's a long time ago now, right? We're still talking about him. We're still remembering those images. Well, those images didn't come out of the blue. They were engineered. But it made the Kennedy brothers, because their father was so rich and they didn't need money from anybody, they went with their consciences. There was nobody bribing them. There was nobody paying them off. They weren't necessarily worried about offending a particular. I mean, they offended everybody. They offended the Texas oil men. They offended the organized crime. They offended the Zionists. I mean, they were just going wild. And I don't think under normal circumstances, without a Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy would ever be the president of the United States. I don't think that would have happened in a million years. He might have been a senator, but he might not even made it to senator,
And then they made sure that would not happen with RFK Sr.
Correct. And one of the things we talk about in the book is Sirhan Sirhan was obviously a patsy. I think everybody understands that who knows the story. He was just standing there with a gun, probably with blanks in it, just firing wildly. And the guy that actually shot Robert Kennedy was behind him. And that even the autopsy guy that did the autopsy, he says the shot came from close range behind his ear. Sirhan was in front of him 5 to 10 feet, depending on what people say. Why, of all the patsies, and I go into this in depth in the last chapter in the book, why, of all the patsies in the world, and the CIA has like a supermarket full of patsies, they can just pull one off the shelf anytime they need one. Why did they pick a Palestinian? I addressed that in the book, in the last chapter of the book, and that's when we get deep into the Zionist connections of the mechanics. When I say mechanics, the people who actually organize the assassination and cover up. That's the important thing. You can't just, committing a crime, pretty easy. Committing a crime in broad daylight with a big public figure, it's not hard. The hard thing is covering it up, and covering it up for decade after decade. But I want to assert that we don't need to see any more new papers released. We have more than enough information to know who the people were that organized it and organized the cover-up. And the weird thing is, we know everything. We know who shined Jack Ruby's shoes the day he shot Oz. We know everything except what really matters, and that's James Jesus Singleton and another Zionist called Meyer Lansky, who was the godfather of godfathers. And he was the guy he's the guy that put organized into organized crime. He was called the mob's banker because he laundered all their money. All right. So you had all these little crime families doing their little business. There was one guy laundering all the money, and he was the developer of something called Murder Inc., which was a nationwide network of hitmen. Another word for hitmen is assassins. So this is, and this guy, by the way, the Kennedys were going after him big time too. His name is never mentioned, and he managed to stay out of the church committee hearings. If anybody ever knows that history, in the 1970s, that's when we were told that the CIA and the organized crime got together to kill Castro, and perhaps that leaked over and ended up killing Kennedy. We're never, and they mentioned I'm half Italian, and actually I'm an Italian citizen now, thanks to my grandma. So I'm half Italian. So they have the Italian guys running around doing all this crazy crime, and there was one guy in the background puppet mastering the whole thing, and his name never got brought up in the church committee meetings. And he helped Israel get weapons during when it was illegal to send weapons to Israel.
It's very interesting. And one more thing that I want to mention as well. So you're basically saying that we really don't need those files declassified by Donald Trump for JFK.
We know. We have all the evidence that we need. In fact, they even ignore stuff. Like if there was one of the things that they kept out, it was revealed about 5 or 6 years ago that the CIA was reading Lee Harvey Oswald's mail before he shot Kennedy. So they knew who Lee Harvey Oswald was. Obviously, they were paying close attention to him. Obviously, they kept the name of the man secret who was actually doing the reading of the mail. And by the way, the guy that assigned the job, James Jesus Singleton. So who was reading Oswald's mail? They released that a couple of years ago. No one paid any attention. No one made a big deal about it. His name was Reuben Efron, CIA agent, and he was posing, and he probably acted as a trade expert, legal trade expert. He had offices in Tel Aviv and Washington, D.C. He was going back between Tel Aviv and Washington, D.C. all the time. And that was the guy that James Jesus Singleton tasked with reading Lee Harvey Oswald's mail. And so this fragment of information was released a couple of years ago. And I'm looking at it going, holy smokes. First of all, why did they keep it secret so long? And we know why they did. They don't want any whiff of the Zionist involvement in the assassination of Kennedy. And I'm not saying it was just the Zionists. The Texas oil men wanted him gone. Organized crime wanted him gone. Everybody that had money in Cuba and lost it wanted him gone. There were a whole lot of people that wanted Kennedy gone. But part of the group, which you never hear of, because you always hear about the mob, you always hear about the Texas oil men, you always hear about the Cubans, you never hear about the Zionists. And they were in it up to their necks. Meyer Lansky, nothing. The organized crime could do nothing without the approval of Meyer Lansky. He was one of the founders of the commission. He went to every commission meeting, and believe me, they didn't decide to kill Kennedy on a whim. And I'm sure that there were mob shooters involved, right? Because you need guys that can shoot straight. You're not going to get guys from Yale and Princeton and the CIA that can do that. You need thugs. So you need organized crime. Nothing could happen in organized crime in the United States at that scale without Meyer Lansky giving his stamp of approval. And he is never, ever, ever mentioned by any of the assassination experts. They're talking about the Italians. It's always the Italians. They never mention Meyer. So this is what we're dealing with.
Interesting. Ken McCarthy, ladies and gentlemen, again, his book is JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionism Extremism. I see it here on Amazon. Where else can people find your book, Ken?
I have a website dedicated to the two books called jfkantiwar.com. And you can find out, you can get information on this book and on the other book, this one here. You can also order, if you don't like Amazon, a lot of people don't, there's an alternative way to order. It will cost a little more. It'll take a little longer, but you can evade and avoid dealing with Amazon. Also, we have lots and lots of videos. I have a lot of videos on the fact that Israel was pursuing nuclear weapons and actually got them. And it was, by the way, it was LBJ that said, hey, go ahead, guys. We don't care. Go ahead, do what you want.
There you go. All right, Ken McCarthy, thank you so much for your time. Guys, go check out his book. Again, JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionist Extremism. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. All right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, that was Ken McCarthy. Interesting things there, right? Don't we like finding out more information about many of these political figures, but definitely check that out. Many of you may remember I brought Rick Sterling on the show a while back, a journalist who wrote an article about a lot of these things, also helped him with that book. So check that out, fam. We have a big show tonight. I have a lot of stories to cover. I believe it's about six more stories to cover. And we will do call in tonight after the show. It has been that kind of week, but we have so much to dive into, ladies and gentlemen. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who's a patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you, fam, doing the damn thing around here. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, thank you so much for your support here. I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. Don't forget about those Sabsters, because they're kind of cool too. They're like, what up? We here. And they're also Sabbies. Don't forget about those guys. Hey, hey, hey. And of course, we also have members. Thank you guys so much for your support. You can see all of their names listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker, just doing the damn thing. I also want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Ken and On-Site First Key. On-Site First Key. That is an interesting name. I don't know. But thank you. Thank you guys so much. And we're off to the races. Again, like I said, we have quite a bit to discuss. I even have a bonus story. I am going to cover that Rachel Maddow story as well, ladies and gentlemen, because we do have to discuss that. Let's go ahead and go to the comments, and then we'll dive into the other stories. Thank you, Mark. Sabby, you should replace Joy Reid. That would never happen. They would never even allow me to be a guest on MSNBC. Oh, no, they wouldn't let this come out. And thank you for this as well. And RBN, do dissidents and hard lens should replace The View. That would be fun. You know what, though? The ratings for that would probably be through the roof. Probably be through the roof. Synchrono Citizen says, good evening from Baltimore. Be more in the house. What's up? Shout out to Edward Perez says, hi, Sabby. Hello, Edward. Shout out to Dwayne Vogel for becoming a Sabby member. Give Dwayne a big whoop, whoop. Hello. Peace and Power Media says, love your work, a smart tire thinker, and you're free. So many sell their souls, and you're as free of the BS as it gets. Thank you for your work. It inspires me to get back into the fight. Thank you so much and appreciate you. James Green. Oh, you're trying to become a member, and every time you try to register, it keeps failing. I'm not sure if you're trying to do this on the computer or if you're trying to do it on the app. Maybe switch to one or the other to see if that makes a difference. I don't know. Sometimes the app can be kind of glitchy from my experience. And thank you, Tim. Kim is based and JFK was really down for the people. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, fam. Tonight's show theme is rather lengthy, but you can see it behind me. 2 things can be true at the same time. And you've heard me say that before on the show, and that cannot be further from the case from the stories that we are discussing tonight. So I want to get into this first story here. Again, tonight we are covering Elon's email to federal workers. We are going to dive into the Rachel Maddow criticism towards MSNBC about Joy Reid's firing. We're going to get into that as well. Amanda Seales versus Don Lemon. We're also covering Jeffrey Sachs' speech at the European Union and those Germany elections, which I think could be a sign for what is to come for other countries in Europe. So 2 things can be true at the same time. Let's go ahead and dive in to this story here. Start us off right, folks, by smashing the like. Thank you. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, just like a Care Bear. This first story. So I have been venting about Elon Musk, and that was even before he became part of the Trump administration. He's a billionaire. He's cocky. He's an asshole. All right. Well, apparently Elon Musk decided to send an email to federal employees telling them that they have to announce accomplishments that they have made within a certain time frame or their job is gone. I kid you not. And those employees didn't like that too much. They are actually, some of them are trying to sue Elon Musk. But what was interesting about this is that even some of the other members of Donald Trump's cabinet also weren't too keen on this. One of them being Kash Patel. Patel tells FBI employees to pause any responses to the Doge email. So you see, they're not even on the same page here. FBI Director Kash Patel told employees to hold off on responding to an email sent at tech billionaire Elon Musk's direction, asking federal workers to list their accomplishments during the previous week. In that memo obtained by News Nation, Patel said the Bureau would handle future responses of the OPM inquiries. So you can see this message here. FBI personnel may have received an email from OPM requesting information. The FBI, through the office of the director, is in charge of all of our review processes and will conduct reviews in accordance with FBI procedures. When and if further information is required, we will coordinate the responses. For now, please pause any responses. So what you see happening here, folks, is that Elon is basically, I feel like Elon Musk is feeling himself, basically. This position has really gone to his head, and he already had a big head to begin with. Now he can't get through the door. That's how big his head is now. So he's really feeling himself. And Kash Patel steps in here and says, wait a minute, you're not in charge of my employees. I will tell them what they can and cannot do. You stay out of this. So now we are seeing a clash here with members of Trump's cabinet against Elon Musk. I also understand that Pete Hegseth also had issues with Elon telling people what to do as well. And we're seeing there's a bunch of confusion because now Donald Trump is pushing back on this. I want to bring this clip in here from CNN. Musk is saying one thing, Patel is saying something else, Hegseth is saying something else, and Donald Trump is now saying, yeah, that was just voluntary. Kid you not. Let's go ahead and get into it.
The frenzy inside the federal government right now as the Trump administration backtracks on a threat to fire workers who don't respond to an emailed ultimatum from Elon Musk. CNN's Renee Marsh is joining us now. She's got all the latest details. Tell our viewers, Renee, what you're learning.
Well, just about 6 hours until that deadline to respond to that email, and the confusion among the federal workforce remains high. Now, the Office of Personnel Management formally notified agencies this afternoon that so-called "what did you do last week" email sent over the weekend is voluntary, and that the failure to respond will not result in resignation. Now, that guidance runs counter to what Elon Musk said over the weekend. Musk posted on X, and I'm quoting, failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. It also
pause here. So I do want you guys to see, this was the message. Again, this is on X. Okay. This is a billionaire just jumping in and telling people, consistent with President Trump's instructions, all federal employees will shortly receive an email requesting to understand what they have done last week. So here's the problem, folks. You literally have someone, a billionaire here, who is he just kind of came in and just took over. Like, what is this? Failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. Don't forget the type of person that Elon Musk is. Don't forget, he didn't even want to allow the Tesla employees to unionize. He's not pro-worker. This is not a pro-worker agenda. This is not, does this feel pro-worker to you? So we have to think about that. One of the things that I do appreciate Doge doing is, again, the government, the transparency about government spending. I appreciate that. And I think those of us that live in this country, I think we have a right to know how the government is spending money. However, I do not agree with people losing their jobs. I'm very clear about this. So he just comes in and tells people, you show me what you've done in the past week, or other than that, you're out of here. Who the hell are you? Like, seriously. Elon Musk has assumed some type of kingship status. And it's very concerning and very scary. His name was not on the ballot. Now, here's another thing I've said before. You guys know that billionaires and the donor class really do control these two corporate parties. That's how it works. In the past, these things seem to have happened behind the scenes, right? Like, we know the politicians are there working for their donors, whether it's Elon Musk or it's like George Soros or Bill Gates, right? We know they answer to that class. And a lot of these politicians are mainly just puppets. That's why they don't fight back. Or if they do fight back, they're gone. We know that. But now what is happening is that Elon Musk is putting all this out in the open. So this is full transparency. We are seeing who's really calling the shots here. And now there seems to be some type of disagreement here between Elon and Donald Trump.
Runs counter to what the president said today. President Trump saying that anyone who doesn't answer is semi-fired or fired. Well, all of this is just, again, really difficult for many of these employees to figure out who to listen to. One employee at the Department of Veterans Affairs telling me today, and I'm quoting, no one knows who's in charge and who to listen to. Now, that "what did you do last week" email appeared to also reveal a rift between Trump-appointed agency heads and Elon Musk. Musk is unelected, not Senate confirmed, to run any government agency, and was essentially telling employees throughout the federal government to report outside the chain of command to him. Now, some 7 agencies, including the Department of Defense, the State Department, and the FBI, told employees not to comply with this request for information at the time that federal employees received it. But today, President Trump downplaying any rift between his cabinet secretaries and the power that Elon Musk is wielding in his.
So this is a really good point here, because thank you so much for saying this, Sabby. This is a bad look. It is, because you know what this looks like? It makes it look like you don't know what you're doing, right? It makes it look like this administration is a complete mess. They don't know what they're doing. There's conflict of interest here. Like, people are saying Elon's saying one thing, Trump saying something else, Patel is saying something else. And again, it's like there's no accountability for what Elon is doing. He just says stuff. He just does things. And then it's like everybody else has to try to find a way to pick up the pieces of the mess that he caused. But again, he does not have to be there. Don't forget, when Donald Trump was president in 2016, he fired people. He fired some of people from his own administration. There are people who's like, yeah, you're not working out, I'm getting rid of you. Don't forget that. So some people are wondering, like, why is Elon still around? Don't forget, Elon Musk did donate a lot of money to Donald Trump's campaign. So don't forget about that. That doesn't mean that he still may not remove him at some point, but just keep that in mind, where a lot of the money came from. Him and Miriam Adelson.
Capacity outside of the government to shrink the federal government's workforce, Wolf. But again, lots of questions, lots of confusion, despite OPM now saying that this is voluntary, and of course the labor union saying that none of this was legal to begin with.
Renee Marsh reporting for us. Renee, thank you very much.
Yeah, not cool, not legal. And like, nobody died and made Elon Musk king. We do have to, acknowledge that here. And I want to show you something else too, because I want to show you something about federal jobs. And when I say federal jobs, I'm not talking about Pentagon, like people who work at the Pentagon. I'm not talking about that. Okay. I'm talking about your everyday Joe Schmo federal jobs and who can be impacted by this. And this is something I think some people may not be aware of, or maybe they are aware, or maybe they don't know, like maybe they're not as aware to this extent. As someone who does come from a military family, my family, you know, was in the military. My family, you know, when retiring, went on to work for who? See, these are the things that people don't really think about. Okay. Is this part right here. Much of the Black middle class was built by federal jobs. That may change. For the last several decades, federal jobs helped Black workers find stable work with guardrails to prevent bias, but mass cuts are threatening decades of upward mobility. And this is what I got to bring home, folks. Because it's not even just Black families. But the reality is there are a number of people who work for the federal government. And I'll give you an example, one that's not connected to military at all, or armed services at all. Okay. In that way, the VA, Veteran Affairs. You know how many people work for the VA? You know how many people I know that were in the military, got out of the military and went to go work for a federal work like the VA? I'm thinking about when I was in undergrad, and I'm thinking about a lot of my friends when we graduated college. Guess what entry-level job they got? A federal job. Because it only required you to have a bachelor's degree or prior experience in the federal government. So you're talking about there were a lot of people that graduated from college and they moved up to DC. I don't think it's happening as much anymore because DC became way too expensive. But back in the day, they were moving to DC to get those entry level federal jobs, because not only were those jobs, you know, they train you, so you didn't have to have 5 years of experience in that field, but you were guaranteed benefits and you get promoted. So if you're familiar with this, you guys, some of you may know, like people that have these federal jobs, like you'll have a code, right? So you may be a G1 or a G2. And as you move up along the years, your number will continue to go up and your pay goes up. There are a number of people, and in particular, Black people, that have been able to build and become a part of the middle class because they worked for the federal government. And this is something that Elon Musk is not going to tell you. This is something that Donald Trump isn't going to tell you. So you look at a lot of the people that live in that DC area, whether it's part of like Southern Maryland or Northern Virginia, Nova. A lot of these people work for the federal government. In fact, I don't know one person that works in DC that does not work for the federal government in some way, shape, or form. And federal government doesn't always mean you work for the Pentagon or you're in the military. It could mean you work for the VA. And that's what people have to understand. So when they are laying off these federal employees, I want you to see who they're laying off. And so the point that I made here, and this is something I really want to highlight. Yes, a significant portion of the Black middle class was built by federal jobs. A billionaire laying off workers is impacting Black wealth. Black wealth is predicted to be $0 in 2053. Let that sink in. So if you are laying off people who have been able to establish, like become a part of whatever's left of the middle class, that is going to impact generational wealth. This is the part people really don't want to grasp. And obviously it's not just Black families, but Black people have been able to become a part of the middle class because they got those jobs with the federal government. Also, some people have been able to get out of poverty because they got those jobs with the federal government. Now, that being said, we need to talk about the private sector versus this public sector here, because the reality is a lot of these jobs in the private sector require a couple of things, right? You may have to have a bachelor's degree. Nowadays, sometimes a master's degree and years of experience. So if you don't have that and you don't come from that, for some people, this was their best bet. Now, I don't blame those people. I blame the system. I blame the system for changing the entry-level job requirements from being 0 to 1 years of experience to 3 to 5 years of experience. I blame that. So when a lot of people jumping around clapping and clapping their hands and they don't know what they're clapping at. And this part is really important for people to see. Now, I want to show you something else that Yvette Carnell pointed out when we talk about being a pro-worker. Here we go. Over 200,000 American workers who have been at their federal jobs for less than a year have been ordered laid off by Trump. Over 200,000 people. Okay? So I want you to think about who some of those people are. What did I just tell you? In this part here, over 75,000 American workers have accepted resignation offers under Trump. Only 37,660 illegal immigrants have been deported during Trump's first months in office. Hold on to that number. The Trump administration is doing a way better job of firing American workers than deporting illegal workers. So what does this tell you, folks? Yvette has a really interesting point here. The numbers don't lie. So when you look at the numbers, when Donald Trump said immigrants are coming here and they're taking black jobs, who's taking black jobs now? You see what I mean? Why is it that the number of people that are being laid off is higher than the number of people that Donald Trump has deported? And going forward, yeah, we know he just got there. I got it. But look at all these American people who lost their jobs. So compare the numbers. Now, does everybody see what I was trying to explain to you in the end? In the end, these billionaires will look out for their class and their class interests. They're not pro-worker. They're not pro-worker. Elon Musk is not pro-worker. Donald Trump, you can't be pro-worker if you're laying off all these American workers. And I told you that billionaires become billionaires because they exploit labor. That's how they're able to become one. So I don't know why people thought that a billionaire was going to come look out for American workers. They're not looking out for you. They're looking out for their class interests. And you have all these people losing their jobs. We're talking about people that have a mortgage. We're talking about people that have to pay rent. People that have kids. What are they supposed to do? Oh, just go get another job. Yeah, how's that working out? Because that sure as hell wasn't working out for people last year. I know people that have been unemployed for almost a year. And it's not because they're not looking for a job. So keep that in mind, right? So two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that, yes, there is waste in the federal government. I think we can all agree to that. And there needs to be more transparency about that. 100%. It could be true that some of these workers, maybe they're not really doing much and they're getting like higher salaries. I would argue those are people that have been there for quite some time. Like I said, with the federal jobs, you usually move up a certain way, like GS this, GS1, GS2, GS3, etc. So there is waste. And there could be some people that maybe not be working as much, but they're getting paid da-da-da. But if you're really trying to make cuts to federal government, you start with the Pentagon. You start with that defense budget. You don't start with jobs. So as a typical billionaire would do, instead of taking from the defense budget, instead of cutting back on these weapons and all that type of stuff, they cut the workers. So two things can be true at one time. You can have waste in the government, and that does need to be exposed, and there does need to be transparency. And yes, there are cuts that need to be made. But at the same time, are they making the right cuts? Think about that. Let's go on to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Don't. Okay. Oh, I think some of these are Okay, thank you. Thank you, Justin. Hey, Sabby, any chance you looked over your email from me yet? Are you considering covering the WSB convention day 2? I didn't know there was a day 2. I covered day 1. I have not seen my email yet. I've been very, very busy. So I'll check, Justin, but I have over 4,000 emails. So I haven't even made a dent in that, but I will check when I get a chance. Huey says Elon is our unofficial president, according to Elon. Lady Alex says my union and leadership instructed us to answer that email. See, there we go. Breeze, Sabby, the DMV would go away if the federal government goes away. It's a lot. I think there's a lot of businesses that people may think, oh, that's a state business. The state takes care of that, but they're connected to the federal government. Skylar says, yep, and the state with the most federal workers isn't even Washington, D.C., it's Alaska. Ain't too many more employers up there. That is true. Yeah. Although jobs pay really well in Alaska, from what I understand. Nubian Net says, yes, my parents met at USPS after my dad got out of the military. My parents had an apartment building and a house in their late 20s. They sent me to private schools. Yep, see what I mean? There you go. Thank you, Jazzy. I used to be a USAID worker, and my husband and I both moved from poverty working for the government. This is something a lot of people just don't realize. Thank you, Jasmine. Although I had criticisms about how the USAID was spending their money abroad. Jasmine says, you're right about federal jobs helping Black wealth. It helped my mom, my sister, and me. They didn't go to college. I had no luck, though I had a degree. Here you go. And thank you, Toothpick. When it comes to immigrants, the right wants people to follow bureaucracy by getting in line and waiting their turn. But when it comes to Elon, ignoring the regulations and bureaucracy in the government, he gets a pass. That's a good point. Good point there, Toothpick. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, I agree with you, Roger. USPS is underappreciated. I do. I know there's a number of times like I've gone to the post office and it's like one person there working and they're having to do everything, like deal with the customers and the packages in the back and everything. So yeah. It's a big one. Okay. This next story. Holy crap. This one's bad. All right. So if you didn't see the video that I covered about Joy Reid being fired from MSNBC, definitely check that out when you get a chance. That video posted Monday. But now there's more information, right? Rachel Maddow is defending Joy Reid, and she's blaming MSNBC for being possibly racist towards not just Joy Reid, but the other hosts that have been fired recently. Jonathan Capehart's show is gone. Iman's show is gone. Although I think Iman and Jonathan may get other positions at the network, but their shows are gone. So she had quite a few things to say. And in the essence of two things can be true at the same time, I want you to keep that in mind with this particular story as well, because I've watched a lot of people cover this story, and most of them are not discussing the ratings. Most of them are not showing the numbers. I'm going to show you the numbers. And is it possible that this also has something to do with the content that has been covered by the people who are being removed? Again, two things can be true at the same time. Let's go ahead and bring in this statement here from Rachel Maddow. Check this out.
I'm going to take a little point of personal privilege here just for a moment, if it is okay with you. You may have already heard about changes that have been announced at MSNBC over the last couple of days. The new president of our network made it official today. Some of our shows are moving to different time slots or expanding or going away altogether. In prime time, just so you know, I am here 5 days a week for the first 100 days of Trump's presidency as planned. And as planned, I will go back to just Mondays after that. That is not changing. What is changing is that the show, Alex Wagner Tonight, is not coming back at 9 after the first 100 days. Instead, Alex will be a senior political analyst for MSNBC, and Jen Psaki will start hosting the 9 p.m. hour all the other nights except for Mondays. So that's a big change. An even bigger programming change is at 7 p.m. Eastern, where Joy Reid's show, The Readout, ended tonight. And Joy is not taking a different job in the network. She is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you.
I was wondering, what job was she doing at 12 years old? I'm just trying to... Maybe like babysitting. I don't know, but she said gainfully employed, right? So I don't babysitting, which I did as well, isn't gainful employment. So I'm trying to figure out what job was she doing at 12 years old. Damn.
But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend.
Okie dokie. You got some balls, Rachel. Rachel got some balls here. So I will say this. MSNBC is a liberal network, right? But some would have you believe this type of thing doesn't happen on the liberal side of things. I've been telling you guys for years that some white liberals can be just as racist as some white conservatives. And every time I brought this up, I was shouted down by people saying, no, liberals aren't racist. Democrats aren't racist. Come live in a blue state. And I think you'll see things a little bit differently, right? So there's that. But I was surprised that she said that on air. From what I understand, Rachel Maddow was one of the people that tried or pushed very hard to make sure that Joy would not lose her show. It's really interesting when we dive back into what happened in 2016, which I'm going to show you as well. So that was interesting. Now, I will say this. I was kind of looking around and wondering, where's everybody else? Because usually when people are removed from a network or any other job, doesn't have to be a network, people don't usually come out for your defense like that. Most people are more concerned about protecting themselves and making sure that they don't lose their job. So they're less likely to come forward or to push back against it, right? Most. But every now and then you'll have a few that will stand up and will speak up and will say something. And she said this on air. So it's good that she said this on air. But my question is, where is Joe and Mika? Where's Chris Hayes, emoji dude? Where are they? Now, I did see Lawrence O'Donnell and the other woman who I always forget her name. I did see them appear on Joy's last show and to, say their piece. But more importantly, the people who a lot of people know the most is Rachel Maddow and Joe and Mika. Where's Joe and Mika on this? Is it possible that Joy Reid's race has something to do with it? I don't know. Two things can be true at once. I'm going to show you a couple of other things that may make you disagree with that, and then some things that may make you agree with it. Let's continue.
And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it. But there's just one other piece of it that you should know. From your side of the TV screen, you will mostly see changes in terms of who's in the anchor chair. And actually, everybody who's going to be in anchor chairs from here on out are great colleagues and great at what they do, and you are not going to be disappointed in who's on our air and what you're going to be seeing. But one thing you cannot necessarily see is that the people who get our shows on the air, they're really being put through the ringer. Dozens of producers and staffers, including some who are among the most experienced and most talented and most specialist producers in the building, are facing being laid off. They're being invited to reapply for new jobs. That has never happened at this scale in this way before when it comes to programming changes, presumably because it's not the right way to treat people, and it's inefficient and it's unnecessary, and it kind of drops the bottom out of whether or not people feel like this is a good place to work. And so we don't generally do things that way.
I think people have been feeling it's not a good place to work for quite some time. I did tell you guys last year, I sounded the alarm. I told you a year ago that MSNBC was looking to make changes and that they were looking to make cuts. Don't forget that Rachel Maddow, her original salary was $30 million a year. She's now $25 million a year because she took that $5 million pay cut. They were already making changes. But I told people about what was coming over a year ago. I told you about what was coming with CNN and what was coming with MSNBC because their ratings were continuing to decline. And that was during the Biden-Harris administration. I guess they were hoping to get a little bit of momentum if Kamala Harris would have won that election, but obviously that did not happen. And the ratings continued to decrease after Kamala lost. And that's the other thing. If Kamala would have won, things could have been a little bit different. But I warned you guys that this was coming. I told you that MSNBC, they had already made some type of agreement here with Comcast. They were looking to make a change and they were looking to make cuts. So I sounded the alarm a year ago. Let's let her finish here.
Maybe all of our folks, including most of the people who are getting this very show on the air right now, maybe they will all get new jobs here. And I hope they do. But in the meantime, being put in this kind of limbo, the anxiety and the discombobulation is off the charts at a time when this job already is extra stressful and difficult. It is not news for me to tell you that the press and freedom of the press are under attack in a way that is really, it's a big deal for our country. It's very visceral for us here. I know that the business of the press is not an easy thing, and I know that no job is forever. But I think I'm safe in saying for all of us anchors who you know through the TV, please know that what pains us the most is not what happens to us. It is what happens to our coworkers on whom we depend and who you don't necessarily know, but we respect and love them and depend on them. And did I mention we respect them?
Okay, so here's the thing again. Rachel Maddow makes $25 million a year. A year. Right? So just keep that in mind. Because when I show you something else, again, this is not new what MSNBC is doing. At King Mike had a really good point here, and some people may have forgotten about this. He's responding to what Rachel said about Joy. Why didn't she do this after MSNBC racial purge of 2016? They fired Melissa Harris Perry, Jose Diaz Balart, and other minority hosts, and no one blinked an eye. See, this brings up other things. Let's go back to 2016. Does everybody remember this? Former MSNBC host Melissa Harris Perry says her firing by the channel 100% has racial implications. So some of you may not remember Melissa Harris Perry, but I remember her. And one of the things that I want to mention is that with her particular situation, she made it very clear that the network was not going to tell her what she could or could not talk about. That was one of the issues that Melissa brought up. And she said, I'm not going to sit up here and just basically be a puppet. There were disagreements that the network had with what she wanted to talk about, and I guess how she wanted to talk about it. And that's what happens with corporate media. That's how corporate media works. The people who kiss the most ass and walk that line that they want you to walk, those are the people that are more likely to get promoted. Those are the people that are more likely to get the great time slots, right? And I bring up Melissa Harris Perry because I just want to remind you of something else. Where do you think Joy Reid came from? It was Melissa Harris Perry who was there in that spot. When they fired Melissa Harris Perry, that opened the door for Joy Reid. See, people forget. Okay? So, it just kind of like, I don't know. These things come back around. When Melissa Harris Perry was fired, that door opened up and Joy Reid walked right through that door, just as Simone Sanders is about to walk through Joy Reid's door. So one of the things that people are also not mentioning is that, yes, Joy Reid lost her show, but Joy Reid isn't being replaced by someone who's white. Joy Reid is replaced by two Black commentators who are already on MSNBC and one Latina commentator. So Simone Sanders, Michael Steele, and Alicia Menendez, whose father is Bob Menendez, who actually just was indicted. Not her fault, but just saying there may be a conflict of interest if you got to talk about her dad. But they are the ones that are replacing Joy Reid's show. They already have a show on MSNBC, but they're going to replace her time slot. Now, what's different about these folks? We all know Simone Sanders is willing to kiss up to people. This is not a first for her. Simone does what she needs to get that check. This is someone who came from Bernie 2016, and as some would point and call her a mole, as a part of that campaign, happily, trashed Bernie 2016, then hopped on over to Joe Biden's 2020 campaign, hoping to get a press secretary gig with the Biden administration. Didn't work out. He picked Jen Psaki. Then she went crying on these interviews and saying, I was hoping I was going to get that damn job. So they gave her a job at MSNBC, and she's on this show with her and Michael Steele, and they do this panel type show, and she's kissed enough ass to be able to walk right into that spot. So do you guys see what I'm trying to tell you? What was done to Melissa has now been done to Joy. And now Simone is about to reap the benefits of that and walk right through that door. Now, again, is Simone Sanders going to say, oh, I don't want to do that to Joy? No. These people are opportunists. Is Michael Steele going to say, I don't want to do that to Joy? No. Media is a dirty, dirty industry. And we all know that show business can be dirty. Media can be dirty too. Even at some of these local news stations, listen, I interned at a local news station many years ago. Even at some of these local news stations, people will do dirty things to get that anchor spot. You'd be surprised. So you see who the replacements are. Now, what is the difference there, right? I told you Simone Sanders is a kiss up. Michael Steele is a little bit more right leaning. Like I wouldn't even call Michael Steele a liberal. He used to be a Republican and now he's like kind of a Democrat, but he's a little bit more right leaning. They're not going to try to rock any type of boat. Now, there was something interesting that I want to show you as well. Like I said, when we get to these numbers, and then I'm going to show you what Joy Reid said. When I go look at the numbers present a different story. And I've seen a number of people who covered this topic, and they're not showing you this, but I'm going to show it to you. Okay. I think that if you worked in corporate media, I think that you may have a little bit more sympathy. Okay. I didn't work in corporate media. If you worked in corporate media and you were friends with Joy, I think you may be a little bit biased. You're going to be a little bit nicer towards her. I didn't work with any of these people. I didn't work at any of these networks. So I'm going to show you what people are not showing you, including some of those who are independent and didn't pull up these numbers. When we look at the numbers, the number one show on MSNBC is Rachel Maddow's show. But even she saw a decline. Even she's noticing a little bit of drop off right here. She's down 9%. Okay. You see, they all falling. We'll get to Emoji Boy in a second. Lawrence O'Donnell's show is number 2. Deadline White House is number 3. The top 3 shows are still losing, right? -9, -17%, -8%. Again, this is February 2025. Then for some odd reason, we get to Chris Hayes, emoji dude, and Chris Hayes, he is up +6%. So what's up with that? Like, what is going on there? Right? Because what you're seeing here is that even though Rachel has the #1 rated program, even she is seeing a decline. But she still has a larger audience than Chris Hayes, but Chris Hayes has an increase somehow, somewhere. Don't know. But here's the interesting part. The cutoff apparently happens, scoot up a little bit, at the top 6. Jen Psaki is also down by 23%. Jen Psaki is down by 23%. Joy Reid in February is down by 16%. But Jen Psaki still has a larger audience than Joy Reid. So it looks like to me, they stopped at the top 6. We are keeping the top 6. Everybody else got to go. But is that really what they did? I don't think so. If you look a little bit closely, you'll see something else. After Joy Reid's show was number 7. Number 8 is Stephanie Rule, however you pronounce her name. Stephanie is down 7%. Stephanie is staying. Stephanie's show is not canceled. Al Sharpton is down 2%. Politics Nation with Al Sharpton has over 458,000 viewership. So why is Al Sharpton keeping his show? Al Sharpton has less viewers than Joy Reid does. Why is he keeping his show? We go down here to 10 and 9, which is Jonathan Capehart. So he has 2 shows. He has a Saturday show and he has a Sunday show. For whatever reason, he is down 4% with the Saturday show, but he's up plus 66% with the Sunday show. John Capehart is also Black. His viewership is less than Al Sharpton and less than Joy. And John Capehart is also gone. His show was gone. They got rid of him too. Why is Al Sharpton still? See, these are the questions. People need to look at these numbers. And I noticed a lot of people who covered this topic didn't look at the numbers. Because while everyone's saying, why'd they get rid of Joy? People need to ask, why is Al Sharpton still there? Now, we'll look further. The Beat Weekend is plus 164%. Ayman is the gentleman. You guys have seen him before. He's Arab American. He's talked a lot about Israel and Gaza. I've shown him before on the show. He's down 18%. And MSNBC Prime Weekend plus 61%. And Rachel Maddow, I guess she has that weekend show, down 11%. So Ayman is in the bottom 8. His show was canceled. Jonathan Capehart's show is canceled. But Al Sharpton and Stephanie are still there. So what this tells me is this, as I've said before, sometimes 2 things can be true at the same time. It could be that obviously the numbers don't look too good for those people. So I think with Joy, it's a combination of things. Yes, her ratings are down. And I can't believe the number of people who covered this in independent media and didn't even mention this at all. Yes, her ratings are down. But if that can't be the only reason, because if it's the only reason, then Al Sharpton would lose his show and Stephanie would also lose her show. And they haven't lost their shows. So that tells you it's something else as well, right? So when you look at these individuals, they ain't really talking about Israel that much. They ain't really talking about it. And Joy, I will say this, Joy Reid talked about Gaza, and there was mild criticism. I'm seeing people say, oh my God, it's because she heavily went after Israel. No, she didn't heavily go after Israel. I've covered it on the show. I've shown some of her segments when she talked about Israel and Gaza, but it was mild criticism. It's not like she was sitting up there and she was saying, oh God, Israel is a terrorist state. It's an apartheid state and da-da-da. No, it was mild criticism. And she was mainly criticizing the number of, children that she was seeing die and all that type of stuff. Totally get that. But it was mild. When it comes to Jonathan Capehart, Jonathan has probably been one of the more corny. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but I've shown Jonathan on this show before too. Jonathan Capehart, black man, also a little kind of corny. Like, the black guy with the glasses. You guys have seen him before. Kind of young, or looks kind of young. Kind of corny. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but kind of corny. I didn't see him out there like defending Gaza and Israel that way. Ayman, yes. Ayman's show heavily talked about that. He featured several Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans. Yes. Ayman, absolutely. And he is Arab American. So yes, I totally will point to that. But I think that when it comes to Joy, it was a combination of things. I think it was obviously the ratings dropping. I think it was obviously, don't forget the hot mic moment when Joy Reid said, starting another damn war. Don't forget about that. And that wasn't supposed to be on air. And then I also think, yes, because of that mild criticism of you're not really supposed to criticize Israel at all in corporate media. So I think some of that mild criticism that she had was also a part of it, but I don't think it was one thing. Some people are saying it's just because of Gaza. No, it's not just because of Gaza. Not in her case, right? But I think the bigger question people need to start asking is, why is it that people aren't watching these shows? Okay? So you need to ask a couple of questions. Why does Al Sharpton still have a show when he has fewer views than she does? That's where the Gaza part could come in. He ain't really talking about that. He towing the line. He's more establishment. Simone Sanders and Michael Steele, who are replacing Joy Reid, more establishment. Joy's establishment, but they willing to kiss more ass. It just is what it is. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. They're willing to kiss more ass. And in that type of business, it's about who you kiss up to. That's how far you can go. Kiss the right people, kiss up to the right person, kiss the right person sometimes, get into a relationship with the right person sometimes. Yes, I announced this as well in the video I covered the other day. She already had a YouTube channel that she started in October 2024. So last year, she started a YouTube channel with her daughter. So maybe she had some inkling. Maybe they had spoken to her about something. You never know, right? But why aren't people watching these shows? Why are more people? And this is something that, I'm sorry, but I think everyone talking about this, you guys need to start asking this question. Why are all these people watching Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell, Chris Hayes, the White House? But when you get down to here and you get to hosts like Joy Reid, Al Sharpton, John Capehart, Ayman, who's almost all the way at the bottom, when you get to the black host and you get to the Arab American host, why are less people watching them? People need to ask that question. Because I'm just, me, I'm going to pull up the data. And then I'm going to ask some questions around the data. Why is that? Because what that is showing you is that there's less interest in what they're discussing. I'm just telling you the truth. Some people may not like to hear what I'm saying, but I'm telling you the truth. Now, Joy Reid does come forward, and I guess she talked about this, and she does mention apparently some of the things she talked about seem to be a problem. Listen to this.
My show had value, and that that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I'm sorry, I try not to cry on TV. And this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize. And then it mattered. I see Karen is there, and she's been texting me as well. And so what I will just say is that in the end, thank you. Where I land is that the moment of guilt that I felt, that I went hard on so many issues, whether it was the Black Lives Matter issues of a young baby or a mom or a dad that was killed, or when we opened up people's eyes to the fact that Asian Americans were being targeted and not just Black folks, or went hard for immigrants who've done nothing but come to this country like my parents did and try to make a life and defended them, or whether we've talked about what the president is doing that is subversive to the Constitution, that is injurious to our liberty, defending books that people find inconvenient, that Nicole Hannah-Jones put into our spirit, that we need to understand 1619 as the real founding of this country, whether it's talking about any of these issues, and yes, whether it's talking about Gaza and the fact that we as the American people have a right to object to little babies being bombed. And where I come down on that is I'm not sorry.
Okay, so that part right there lets you know that obviously there must have been some concerns about some of the topics that she discussed. So some of the Gaza stuff and some of the BLM stuff, although she's been talking about the BLM topics for years, but apparently some of that might have been an issue there.
I am not sorry that I stood up for those things, because those things are of God. And I'm a church girl too, and those are the things that I was taught were of God. And so I'm not sorry. I'm just proud of my show.
So it was interesting with her crying there, because it's just like she says, like, she really thought that what she was doing had value. And it's just, I think that if she would have been paying more attention to independent media, or maybe if she would have paid more attention to people who were tuning out, like people who were tuning out of the show, then maybe she would have seen something different, right? Because the reality is, and I'm gonna get to this in just a second, something that Mark Lamont Hill said here, and this was mentioned to me, I want you guys to hear something that Mark Lamont Hill said on his show about how great Joy Reid was. And now I know that Mark Lamont Hill came from corporate media. I totally get that. I understand that. But I felt like this part here is a stretch, and I do want to disprove something here in just a second. Listen to this.
What do you mean by that? Joy Reid is courageous, and she is honest. She is one of the few voices on the network who is willing to criticize the party.
Okay. Courageous and honest. I totally disagree with that. People have to remember that during Bernie's campaigns, Joy Reid was one of the commentators that lied about Bernie Sanders' campaign. She was one of the commentators that smeared Bernie supporters. She also smeared and lied about the ADOS organization. These are just a few things. She was not courageous when it came to standing up to corporate donors and corporate money. In fact, I remember her tweeting this out. She even tweeted out, like, get over this talking point of being against corporate money. So if you were someone that is progressive, if you were someone that is to the left of the Democratic Party, Joy Reid really was not a friend to that movement or to a lot of these policies that you really wanted. In fact, she did everything in her power to go against that. So what I didn't understand from this conversation that was coming from Mark Lamont Hill, why are you trying to defend Joy Reid in such a sense that you are willing to say that she was honest and that she was courageous. No, she wasn't. The criticism that she had of Israel, again, was mild. She wasn't courageous to stand up against donor money. She wasn't honest when she was lying about Bernie campaign. The number of lies. There was a number of times I had to call out her lies on the show. She wasn't honest when she sat up there and lied about Kamala Harris's campaign, and she said that she ran a flawless campaign. That was a lie. There's no such thing as a flawless campaign, period. I don't care who you are, period. She was lying when she was talking about the support that Kamala Harris had. The numbers I showed you were true. The numbers that Joy showed on her show, which I called out on the show, were false. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Let me continue.
Yes, she is a Democrat in ways that I'm not. I'm not a Democrat. And she supports the Democratic Party in ways that I don't. And she and I haven't always agreed on voting patterns and such. She's called me to task on my choice, and I've done the same to her. I haven't really called her to task, but I've disagreed with her calling me to task. You know what I'm saying? Again, I don't always agree with Joy. I agree with her on the Bernie stuff. We have some disagreements, but at the core, Joy Reid believes something and she advocates for it. And when she doesn't believe something, she challenges it, even if it isn't the popular decision. This is why.
So there's a difference between having a disagreement with someone about a political campaign or political strategy and just flat out lying. Joy Reid lied. And I don't understand why Mark Lamont Hill was trying to sit here and trying to, I don't know, like heavily defend her or whatever, because he knows her. There may have been, a professional relationship there. I understand that, but she lied. So I can disagree with you about something, but there's a difference between disagreeing and flat out lying about something as well. So I don't want to show you what this looks like, because see, people think that I forgot. I didn't forget. I said, also remember Joy Reid lying about Bernie's campaign, smearing Bernie supporters. She also smeared ADOS, and yet people are saying she was always honest. No, she was not. All of a sudden, people forgot. And you can see the picture here. This is a screenshot. Black voters continue to be the subject of digital disinformation campaigns. Look at what they put as a disinformation campaign. This was on Joy Reid's show. The very first one, ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves. List of issues targeting Black voters. Reparations, criminal justice, climate change, immigration. Do you see what is happening here? She put ADOS, the American Descendants of Slave organization, in the same freaking group with Blexit. Did you see this? Then she pointed out tangibles, hashtag FBA, Foundational Black Americans. She said these people were disinformation campaigns, Black voices for Trump and walk away. Okay, so these are people that are lineage here. Obviously, American Descendants of Slavery, that's a lineage. How is that disinformation? She smeared them, talking about these people were Russian bots. No, Mark, she was not honest. Whether you agree with ADOS or not, that was a bold-faced lie and a smear. Anything to help the Democratic Party. So no, some of us don't forget. And that is in response to this here I wanted to show you. Good riddance to Joy Reid, who was just another corporate media shill who enabled the corruption of the Democratic Party. It is not and will never be okay that Democrats and Republicans are bought off and bribed with corporate money. It's the sole reason they don't serve the people. And you'll see this is the screenshot they're referring to. This was Joy Reid. She tweeted this. Now I think she left Twitter at some point, but she tweeted this. Dude, all candidates raise money from corporate donors. Wake up and retire this silly talking point. That was Joy Reid responding to Josh Pierre, who said what most progressives are hearing is that you have to accept corporate Democrats, but we won't accept real progressives. And that was Joy Reid's response. So no, she was not courageous. Stop. When it came to progressive policies, when it came to like progressive and all that type of stuff, Joy Reid was not your friend. Joy Reid was an enemy. She was actively working against you. Actively working against you. And I can't believe all the people who were like, who supported like the progressive policies running to jump in and defend Joy the way that they're doing it. Joy didn't defend you. She smeared you. And do not come to me and say, well, she's black, so no. Y'all ain't learned nothing from Cornel West yet. What did he tell you? Black faces in high places. Just because she looks like you don't mean she fighting for you. Get out of here with this mess. Who does this? Who does a whole segment where they call American descendants of slavery disinformation? Who does that? And they're supposed to be on our side? Get out of here. And again, the numbers show you once again here, you'll see. Did MSNBC cancel Joy Reid's show due to ratings or Donald Trump? Yada, yada. I just want to get into the number again so people can see this for themselves once again. Here we go here. Declining viewership. Because see, I see people ain't want to put this on their show, right? Everybody was talking about her losing her job, but they ain't want to show you these damn numbers. In December, the Nielsen Media Research indicated that MSNBC saw a 53% decline in primetime viewership post-election. That is her category, the prime time. So with her, again, two things can be true at the same time. It's multiple things. It's the ratings. Yes, there was a big drop off after Kamala lost. People were looking for other things. I'll get to that in a second. The ratings, the mild criticism of Israel. It's mild. Let's stop talking about Joy like she was out here like Nelson Mandela or some shit. I didn't see it all on social media, okay? And then the other thing as well, the ratings, the mild criticism of Israel, and the reality is people, they weren't watching you. It's the same with a lot of the rest. Now, I would say, again, look at the numbers. They're not watching. Those people who dropped off from those shows, what did they go to watch? After the election, they were looking for answers somewhere else. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're one of those people that was like, wait a minute, I think they lied to me about Kamala's chances. I need to seek out information elsewhere. Maybe you were one of those people. Maybe that's how you found other independent media channels. I don't know. But they went somewhere. And ultimately, I think what people need to ask, instead of everyone just saying like, oh, they just want all the black people to go and da-da-da, you know, where was all that when Melissa lost her show? Well, where was all that, right? I think the question people need to ask is, how the hell does Al Sharpton still have his show and his numbers are lower than most people on here? Whose ass did he kiss? Ask that question. And ask the question, why did people stop watching those shows? That's what you need to find out. And get into all of that. I'll be the first to sit up here and say, I'll be the first to tell you this is happening because so-and-so is black or so-and-so is this, da-da-da. But with Joy, it's not one thing. It's not like, oh, they're getting rid of her just because she's black. It's a combination of things. And then to make it worse, like I said, they replaced her with 2 black people and 1 Latina person. So it's not like you can't say they got rid of Joy and they replaced her with 1 white person. That's not what happened. A mess. What a mess here. What a mess. Now, I'll say the fact that, you know, Rachel Maddow stood up for one of her coworkers. Hey, that's what you're supposed to do. If you feel you're in the right, that's what you're supposed to do. And what other people should ask is, where are the rest of them? Where are the rest? Where's everybody else? Okay, right? Because Joe and Mika, I didn't hear them say anything. Two things can be true at the same time. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, thank you, Huey. Everyone on the recent firing list criticized Israel. And thank you, FM. Maddow openly criticized her bosses on air, yet still has a job. White power is something else. Thank you, TT Lay. Joy accused ADOS of being botched. She can kiss my black ass. I know. This is one of them. I'm telling you. Thank you, New York Varsity. They need Rachel more than she needs them. Thank you for this as well, New York. If it is about cost, then why didn't Maddow restructure her contract? If it was about resentment for her friend getting axed, then why didn't she quit? Good questions. Good questions. We can talk about this tonight on Call In. Thank you, DZ. Rachel would make a good mall elf and Jay Reed Santa. You guys are a trip. Thank you, Courtney. Then why don't Rachel put her money where her mouth is and step down if MSNBC is being racist? Girl, come with it. Come with it. Thank you, Lindo. Al Sharpton's show was part of the Comcast deal. His show was a payoff. It came out of the Byron Allen lawsuit. Interesting. So his show gets to be a part of that deal and he has that few views. Interesting. Let's go to Blueser. If we can bring up part 2 of Type VNC. Thank you. Let's go to Blueser. Heard the AKAs had a hand in Cape Hart's axe drop. That's interesting. I didn't think, I just felt like he was kind of corny. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but I felt like that show wasn't entertaining. Thank you, Tim, though. Joy Reid is being fired for that blonde half wig. Thank you, Tim. Well, Joy, you should have called out Biden for Gaza. Bye. Okay, shout out to Isang, who's been a member for 22 months. Joy Reid taken out like Mehdi Hassan. Thank you. Where's the love? A tether got tarred and feathered. I don't know what that means. And thank you, New York. At least with BJG, there is little joy there. Reid has none. That's another thing. Don't forget, Joy Reid actively blackballed Breonna Joy Gray from coming on to MSNBC. I told you guys, this stuff all comes back on people. May not be tomorrow, may not be a year from now, but it eventually comes back. Don't know what to tell you. All right, guys, if you haven't done so, smash the like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, just like a Care Bear. Thank you very much. And we're moving on to the next story. I am sending an alarm, a big warning, and it's not just about Germany. It is about what is to come. The results of the Germany election, if anything, could be a precursor to what happens to other countries in Europe going forward. The conservatives have won in Germany, but more importantly, the far right party in Germany has made significant gains. We are going to go ahead and dive into these election results here. Everyone, you got to pay attention to what's happening around the world.
Well, nearly 60 million Germans have headed to the polls over the weekend for this national snap election after the centre-left government led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz collapsed last December. The exit polls are in and they show that the opposition Conservatives have won the election, putting leader Friedrich Merz on track to become the next Chancellor. But the far-right Alternative for Deutschland party looks set to become the second biggest force in the German parliament. The exit polls show it's doubled its share of the vote from the last election. The AfD party ran a campaign on anti-immigration, trying to capitalise on a spate of recent deadly attacks we've seen in Germany by asylum seekers. Here's the party's leader, Alice Weidel.
So this is the AfD party. This is the far right party in Germany that has made significant gains this time around. So they have doubled their support. And I think this is important for people to see. You need to understand what's happening here. Number one, Germany has the largest economy in Europe. So Germany can easily set the tone. Notice the reporter there said that they ran on an immigration platform. Does that sound somewhat familiar of what we had happen here in the United States? There were a number of people that came out to support Donald Trump because they were against the migrant issue. They were not happy with the way that Kamala and Biden were handling the immigration situation. So what happened is people swing all the way over to the other direction. The pendulum does swing. So we saw that happen here in the United States, and now we see that happening in Germany as well. This is what I've been trying to sound the alarm about. When the current leadership that is in power, if they do not take charge and really listen to what their voters want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be immigration, but whatever issue is important to you, if they don't do that, typically what tends to happen is that people swing in the other direction. We saw that happen with Donald Trump, and you're seeing that happen in Germany. Let's continue.
We have achieved a historic result. We have never been stronger in the federal government. We have become the second strongest force as alternative for Germany, and we have now firmly established ourselves as a people's party.
Germany is Europe's biggest economy, so this result is likely to have big implications across the continent. And it follows a recent shift towards the far right in countries like Austria and France. The Conservatives won't form a government in their own right. They will need to form a coalition. We don't know if that will be with another party or two parties, but they've already said that they will rule out working with the AfD party because it's too dangerous. But this result is likely to set the stage for protracted talks.
So people have to understand, in Germany, they do have more political parties that we do, or they have more viable political parties than we do here in the United States. I would love to have something like what Germany has, how they have like all of these different parties. And I'll show you what that looks like here so you guys can see that. A guide here to their political parties. Again, like, I wish we had something like this. They have the CSU, which is the Christian Democratic Union, right? And these are the guys who won big here. So Frederick Merz, we'll get into who he is and where he actually came from. You need to know some things about Frederick. Okay. All right. So they have that party, which is obviously conservative party. They also have let me bring this up here, the SPD, the Social Democratic Party, as you can see there. And that's self-explanatory, you guys. Right? They also have the Green Party, just like we have the Green Party here in the US. Their Green Party gets more support. And it's because the way their system is set up is different, right? So theirs does receive more support than the Green Party here in the United States. And then there is also this party I was telling you about, the AfD, the far right party, which has now really, again, doubled in support. And what you'll notice here under these parties, it says who their preferred coalition partner is. So with the Green Party, their preferred coalition party is that SPD party, right? The Social Democrat Party. And then, but that's the one, the AfD party. This is the party that you really need to keep an eye on. There's also the Free Democratic Party, which is the FDP. That is a neoliberal pro-free market party. So again, as you guys can see, you won't have to go through all this because I'm going to show you in just a second on the video, but they have multiple parties, the BSW. Sarah, Glenn Greenwald interviewed her via translator. So she had quite a bit to say about the Ukraine war. She was heavily against that. Another one here as well, mainly former Left Party and former AfD supporters, mainly in Eastern Germany. So let's go ahead and go through this breakdown a little bit so you guys can see what this means for Germany and what it could possibly mean for Europe as well.
Since the election, the opinion polls had the CDU on about 30%, the AfD on about 20%, the SPD on 15%, the Greens on 12%, the Left on 7%, and both the BSW and the FDP just under 5%, which is the threshold for representation legislation in the German parliament. This meant that a lot would depend on whether or not these two parties made it to the 5% threshold, as if they didn't, the CDU and the SPD would probably be able to form a two-party grand coalition. But if they did, they'd probably win enough seats to force the CDU and SPD to find a third coalition partner. In the end, the polls were broadly correct. The CDU finished first with 28.5% of the vote, a roughly 4 percentage point increase from their 2021 results, meaning its leader, Friedrich Merz, will likely be Germany's next chancellor.
So notice what they showed you there. There was a 4% increase for this conservative party from 2021. So again, we are seeing similarities there. What we saw here happen in the United States, we're seeing similarities happen there in Germany, where the Conservative Party increased their support in 2025. Let's continue.
Next up in second were the AFD with 20.8%. And while this was a few points less than some pre-election polls had been predicting, it was still the party's highest ever result and double what they got in 2021.
Again, the AFD, this is that far right party. So in 2021, you can see they had a little bit over 10%. And now you see in 2025, they're almost at actually a little bit over that 20% there. So the message that I'm trying to send to people is this. I want people to pay attention to what's really happening here. People are moving further to the right. And I tried to sound the alarm about this, that if you don't meet the needs of what the people want, even in this country, if you're not helping out the people, if you're not meeting the needs of the American people, whether it's economic needs, which tends to be everyone's number one, people tend to go in the other direction, or they stay home. What did we notice about the election here in 2024? A lot of people stayed home. When you compare those numbers to 2020, a lot of people said, no, this economy is like horrible. I don't want to participate in this at all. If you look at the 2020 presidential election, a lot of those people that came out to vote for Joe Biden, it's not like they loved Joe Biden. That was a vote against the current administration at that point in time, which was Donald Trump. So that was a vote against him. They swung in the other direction. I had coworkers that voted for Trump in 2016 that turned around and voted for Biden in 2020. And a lot of that had to do with some of his actions like the Muslim ban, but also the way he handled the pandemic. Then we fast forward to 2024 and you see similarities where people were really upset with the Biden administration this time around and people swung in the other direction. And you just have this pendulum that just swings back and forth. This is what happens when you don't meet the needs for the everyday people. And I think eventually what is going to happen is that eventually is going to get to the point where I think more people are out in the streets. Because I think, and I hope I'm correct with this, I think what I'm seeing from particularly people here in the US is that more people are starting to see that both these parties really are not looking out for working class interests. And I think the more and more people that see that, more and more people will start to break away. I think we're close to the breaking point. I don't think we're there just yet. A little bit more here on how these results played out.
There was also a stark regional divide here, with the AFD winning the most second votes, i.e. party list votes, in most constituencies in the east, apart from Berlin, neighbouring Potsdam and Leipzig, and the CDU winning most in the west. Support for the AFD was also higher among voters with a basic education.
So what you're seeing is the unification is not there anymore. Let's go back to the split here of Germany.
Constituencies in the east, apart from Berlin, neighbouring Potsdam and Leipzig, and the CDU winning most in the west.
So once again, it appears that Germany is divided. It appears that East Germany and West Germany are divided yet again. Now, I remember once upon a time, there was a Berlin Wall. I saw the Berlin Wall in person. I was very, very little, but I saw it in person. And when that wall came down, the idea is that East and West Germany would unite. There were people that had relatives on one side of the wall that they hadn't seen in years, because they were separated by a wall. Now it appears that unification is no longer happening. If this is true, what this map is showing you, that unification between East and West Germany doesn't seem to be there anymore. And it seems like the split is happening again. A little bit more here.
Support for the AFD was also higher among voters with a basic education, who are twice as likely to vote for the AFD as those with a higher education. Moving on, the SPD came third with 16.4%, their worst result at a federal election since 1887. Scholz took responsibility for this, calling it a bitter result and a defeat, but also took aim at the AFD and said, "We live in a democratic country and we're fighting for democracy. That an extreme right party like the AFD can get results like this in Germany is not something we can just forget about."
Do you hear a similarity there where he says, we are fighting for a democracy? Does that sound familiar to you? Don't you hear people saying that, politicians saying that here in the United States, we're fighting for a democracy? How is it that a Donald Trump figure could have won again? There's a disconnect here with the people. These politicians are just completely disconnected from the people. And I think the response that you see with the far right party in Germany, that increase, I think that says a lot. The fact that the SPD decreased when compared to 2021, you can see there's a decline here, and there's a decline between the SPD and an increase between the AFD. People are going in a different direction. So the winner here of the CDU, Frederic, I want to tell you where this guy comes from. Because everybody's like, Frederic. Let's talk about Frederic, shall we? Let's talk about Merz. Who is Frederic Merz, the man on course to take Germany's top job after election? Let's go into it. That's him. I don't want to go into his whole life story, but there are just a couple of things that I do want to show you about him. And that is where he came from. We're not going to get into the whole rivalry and all that stuff. This part right here. Merz turned his back on active politics for several years after leaving the parliament in 2009. He practiced law and headed the supervisory board of investment manager BlackRock's German branch. Pause. Right here. There you go. That's who this guy is. It's not like he was a part, he headed it. He headed the supervisory board of investment manager BlackRock's German branch. That's who Merz is. So you have someone from BlackRock now in charge. And his party will have to build a coalition with another party. But the reality is, yikes. Now, why is that important? Donald Trump says he wants to end this war in Ukraine. BlackRock doesn't want the war to end in Ukraine. I'm sure Merz doesn't want the war to end in Ukraine. Most of these NATO countries don't want that war to end in Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen. So you see, pay attention to this because this could explain some things later on. And it says during that break, he often traveled for business to the United States and China, though he never lived outside Germany. So that's what's happening there with Germany, ladies and gentlemen. And I told you, always look at these people, man. You always have to look up the information and see where are they coming from. It reminds me of France. Why am I forgetting his name? Marcon? What's his name? Why do I forget his name? Anyway, it reminds me of Macron. It reminds me of Macron because Macron was an investment banker. We literally have banks entering politics. Now, I don't live in Germany, and I'm sure most of you watching don't live in Germany, but we're talking about the largest economy here. And that guy just won. And that makes me wonder if that is going to put a wrinkle in Trump's plans here to try to fully end that war in Ukraine. I don't know. We'll have to sit back and watch, but something to keep an eye on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Courtney. I'm actually a dude. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Courtney. I didn't know. But thank you for that. Marvin said, at least they have more parties versus the US. Yeah. I mean, I wish we had more parties like that here. Paula says the parties get hurt because of coalitions, though. That's true. And thank you, Wasim. Olaf Scholz says fighting for democracy, but made it illegal to chant in Arabic in Germany or waving Palestinian flag, but also pro-ISIS protests. And there you go. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening in Germany now. And I don't know, you guys, with this guy winning. Thank you for this one as well. How could you not know who is Macron dude married his teacher who used to be a man, allegedly. I know who he is. I just forgot his name. And again, I say allegedly because, again, y'all ain't coming for me. They ain't coming to sue me. Okay. Quick announcement here, ladies and gentlemen, because we did lose a great one. And then we'll get to the other stories here. And I got to give a shout out. We have to give a shout out to Roberta Flack, amazing singer, beautiful voice, and she did pass away. And I think a lot of people that grew up during that time, I think they know at least one Roberta Flack song, right? The most popular one from her is Killing Me Softly, but it's not the only one. And we got to give a shout out here to Roberta Flack. 18 essential Roberta Flack songs. There's an older picture of her there. She had probably an amazing voice, and I'm sure you guys can find at least one Roberta Flack song that you like. So top 15 ones, according to Rolling Stone, compared to what? That's 1969. I'm not familiar with that one. The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face. I am familiar with this one. The first time I ever saw your face. You guys remember this one? First Time I Ever Saw Your Face is 1969 as well. The other one here is Ballad of the Sad Young Men. I'm not familiar with that one. Some of you in the chat might remember some of these that I don't remember. And then, of course, there's Donny Hathaway, also an amazing voice. You've Got a Friend with Donny Hathaway. Yeah. It's so sad. Donny Hathaway died at a young age, and that's unfortunate because he was very, very talented. Another one here is Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, 1971. And by the way, you know, people remake these songs too. So you may have heard a different version of one of these songs. Just Like a Woman, 1970. And of course, we can't play the music on here, so that sucks. But you guys know how it is. Where is the Love with Donny Hathaway? That's another one, 1972. Where is the love? Where is the love? That one. Be Real Black for Me, also with Donny Hathaway, 1972. So they had a lot of duets together. Another one here, of course, is Killing Me Softly. Now, that one was 1973. You guys know this one? I heard he sang a good song. I heard he had a style. You know what's unique about this song? It was remade by a group called the Fugees. And Lauryn Hill sang the song, and, you know, Wyclef and Pras was in the back, and they were like, one time. Wyclef was like, one time. But that's one of the few remakes that I like. I'm not a big fan of when people remake songs. I usually prefer the original. But I thought the Fugees did a pretty good job. They took Killing Me Softly and they, you know, made it kind of a little bit hip hop, a little bit, you know, pumped it up a little. But I like that. The Fugees. Yeah, Killing Me Softly with his song, Beautiful, probably one of her most popular songs, or probably the most popular one. Some Gospel, according to Matthew, was 1975. And Feel Like Making Love, 1974. People definitely remade this song. There's that one. Again, such an amazing voice. Oh, this is my second fave, is The Closer I Get to You with Donny Hathaway. What part of this do I know? Over and over? Oh, over and over again, I try to tell myself that we could never be more than friends. And all the while all the while inside, I knew it was real. The way you make me feel. That's a good one to listen to, you guys. Listen to The Closer I Get to You. And then Back Together Again with Donny Hathaway, 1980. She also had one with Peabo Bryson. I don't know if they Making Love, 1982. Oh yeah, I think that's Peabo right there. Tonight I Celebrate My Love. Tonight I celebrate my love for you. That's a good one too. That was 1983. Oasis, 1988. She was around for a while. And then Look Out, Here It Comes. I'm not familiar with that one, 1988. And then Set the Night to Music with Maxi Priest was 1991. So she's around for quite some time. But ladies and gentlemen, again, let's give a shout out here for Roberta Flack. Great songs, great music. Again, I know some people are just like, you know, how do you know like this stuff? My parents listened to that music. Like even when I was growing up, my parents tend to listen to like older music. I'm kind of like an old soul, so I prefer older music. So yeah, great voice. I wish we had people that could sing and I don't know, write those kind of songs today, but very, very different. Very different. Yeah, FM says rest in power, Roberta Flack. That's right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the next story. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash the like. And we're moving on to this one. Very interesting. Thank you. Where's the love? Luther Vandross said she was a mentor to him. Interesting. I didn't know that. That makes sense, though. Okay, again, the theme is two things can be true at the same time. And I can say that with this next topic here as well. You see, it appears that, you know, activist Amanda Seales was on Don Lemon's show. And I guess she took this as an opportunity to try to school him about what the Democratic Party is really doing. Now, Amanda Seales, I know some people have different opinions of her. I'm not going to get into the entertainment part with Issa Rae. I'm not getting into all that for this particular conversation, but I do want to focus on what she said here politically. So shout out to Case Study QB for this clip here. Here's Don Lemon and Amanda Seales. It's interesting because she is basically going to tell Don Lemon to his face about what corporate media really does. Listen to this.
You know, you were on cable news. They rarely show what's going on in the world. Rarely. Especially when it has to do with resistance. Because cable news and mainstream media is here for the purpose of suppressing resistance. They're not trying to incite the people. They are tools of the propaganda machine. So the effort to show that and encourage people is not going to be utilized on those airwaves. That's why there's such a egregious effort to silence, you know, social media in that way. However,
isn't that interesting that she's saying this to Don Lemon's face, and Don Lemon kind of looks to the side here a little bit because she's basically telling him about a network like what he was a part of. So she's saying you were a part of a propaganda outlet, which is true. He was. I mean, what do you say to that? At least she said it to his face. To his face. And the look, he just looks down like, ugh.
When you look at France, they didn't even change the pension. They just talked about it. They talked about it. They didn't even take away pension. They were just like, hey, we might do this. And France was like, oh, hell no. We burning cars. In Grenada, the same person was in power for quite some time. And then he got a little too comfy and tried to do the same thing with pensions. And Grenadiers was like, whoa, get him out of there. Get him out of there immediately. And that was that. It wasn't even like a confusion. It was just, finished, party done. So
do you guys understand what Amanda is saying? What Amanda is saying is that I guess she doesn't understand why in the US people are less willing to get out in the streets by like the millions and say F you to the government, F you to, corporate media, to the establishment. Meanwhile, when you look at countries like France and you look at countries like, she mentioned Grenada, I think she's part Grenadian. These people have no problem doing that. I covered the France protest. I think it was like 2 years ago now when that happened. Yeah, they were not letting up. They're like, no, you're not going to increase our retirement age. So where is that energy here in the US? Where is that resilience, right? So we see some of that, obviously, during the pro-Palestinian protests. We saw some of that during the George Floyd protests. But what I noticed is that when it comes to economic issues, we don't see that, right? I mean, I look back on it and I think back during the pandemic and all these lockdowns were happening at that point in time. And it's kind of wild and bizarre to me that, like, for the most part, a lot of people just sat back and took it for the most part. And I'm kind of surprised. And I feel like in some of the other countries, they didn't treat it that way. In some of the other countries, they were like, we're giving you checks every month, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to give you no one stimulus or 2-time stimulus. We're going to give you a check every month. And you guys don't have to worry about going to work. You can stay at home, take care of yourself and your fam. That's what New Zealand did. So I think it's mind boggling to me too. Like how people we are not getting out in the streets for the economic issues. And that brings it back to demands and 11 demands. I think it is amazing and it's great that we got out into the streets for Gaza. I think it's amazing and it's great that we got out into the streets for George Floyd. But why aren't we getting into the streets to have a mass movement for economics? And that's the question people need to really start asking. Start tapping your friend on the shoulder and ask them, why aren't we having a movement in this country for economics? I don't know. Because all these different organizations, you see, you have an Answer Coalition, Answer Coalition puts on a lot of events and they have buses that pick up people from these locations and take them all to DC to protest. And that is great and amazing. I don't see Answer Coalition doing that for economics. So what's really happening, folks? Where is that same push when all these people lost their jobs? Look back at the 2008 housing crisis. Like, where is the same push and energy for all these people to get out in the streets for economics? We have to have that conversation because you see, they do that in France and they did that in Grenada.
I say all of that to say that Americans have been tricked into thinking they're comfortable. And this is done by small incrementations over time that we don't argue enough about, right? When we talk about how when they took your rights for Roe v. Wade, that's when everything should have been just handled. Mm-hmm. And I'm being careful with my language for obvious reasons. But that is when we as people needed to demonstrate in a way that did not leave confusion about our frustration. Mm-hmm. You were on.
So that's a really good point there that Amanda brought up. And I know some people in the chat were saying that, we had to work and stuff. Totally get that. Totally get it. But we were also working during the pro-Palestinian protests. And those protests went on for over a year. And some people are still protesting. They're not as large as they were, but those protests went on for over a year. I think what Amanda says here is true, that we have been convinced, we've been tricked into thinking that we're comfortable when we're actually not. Not all of you watching me, of course, but I'm just saying, like, the majority of Americans, I think, have been conditioned to believe that they're okay, economically okay. And that brings up this point here about the Democratic Party, because again, why don't they fight, right? Listen to what she says to Dawn about this.
One of the issues with Democrats is that just like Republicans, many of them are very much married to corporate dollars as well as AIPAC.
Okay.
So unless you are truly disconnecting from that, you can't really remodel what the function of the party is, because it's still controlled by the same levers, even if the intentions of the representatives are different. Am I making sense?
Yeah, because they're still operating within the same system that, right? That sort of.
It's bigger. It's like the good apple cops. You know, it's like you come in there with a good heart, but it's bigger than you.
That part right there. This is why I don't believe that the Democratic Party can be reformed. And once upon a time, I did believe that. And then I think we saw how all that played out since 2016, right? What Amanda just said, it's bigger than you. So two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that there are people who really do want to try to reform the party and believe that if they just keep trying, it can happen. But at the same time, it can also be true that the party is not going to allow that to happen. So you're basically just butting heads. You're like, here, right? So what do you do then? This is why I've continued to say, instead of people are wasting their time by trying to fight inside of a corporate establishment party, those people should just coalesce and have a separate party. I've shown you guys all the different countries that have so many different parties. And yet so many people here just become, I don't know, they just become able to accept, oh, well, it's two parties that kind of run the show, so just leave it how it is. But the people who really want to so-called reform that party, those people are part of the problem. And I didn't understand that in 2016. I didn't understand that in 2018 when Justice Democrats was coming. I didn't understand at that point. I thought that was the right way to go. But they're part of the problem because they're helping maintain the status quo, because they're working with the party that is status quo and that is taking the corporate money. To Amanda's point, as much as people like Jasmine Crockett and everybody now wants to point out about the big money, the billionaire money on the Republican side, to Amanda's credit, you really ain't got room to talk when you in the Democratic Party and you got billionaire money on your side. And I warned you guys coming into 2025 that the Democratic Party was going to go with this narrative that billionaire money is controlling the Republican Party, as if these mofos do not have billionaire money controlling the Democratic Party as well. I told you. And what do you see happening? So I think Amanda is correct about that.
It's bigger than you. And so how do you shift that? And that requires grand actions. And we have yet to be able to see that with Democrats, because there is an individualism among Democrats that really is reflective of this colonial empire that we're in. But that's part of why there's still establishment.
So
unless you get a party that's either not called Democrats, or you get Democrats who are like, there's enough of us to say, we not y'all no more. We not y'all no more.
So does everybody get that? And that's the thing. So what did the Democratic Party do? They became more clever. After Justice Democrats were able to get into that party, again, these people were not supposed to win. They were not supposed to beat people like Elliot Engel and Joe Crowley, who've been there for years and just take a lot of corporate money. So what the Democratic Party did is that, oh, we see what's happening here. You guys think that you're going to come in and you're going to change things. So they became smarter and they became proactive to prevent that from happening again. That's why you don't hear much about Justice Democrats anymore. And then Justice Democrats started to lose money. Now I hear they're asking for money again. Of course, because Trump's in office. During Biden and Kamala, they said they ain't had no money. They ain't run no candidates. Now all of a sudden they want some money. And they're like, let's run some people. So you see what that's really all about. So to that point, if the Democratic Party, Democrat leadership, and the donor class peeped the game, and they found a way to prevent that from happening again. So had this been round two or whatever, AOC and them would have never got in. Had they been prepared, AOC and them would have never gotten in. I told you before, the Democratic Party tends to be reactive instead of proactive. So their response to the Justice Democrats winning in Congress, winning those congressional seats, was to make sure that others wouldn't get in, and also to make sure some of them would lose their seats. So I would say the options that Amanda presented, you would have to go with the former, which is to start a whole different party.
Which I don't think is realistic. I was going to say, like, it's not just AIPAC. It's lobbyists. It's, you know, so it's not just AIPAC, right? It's big pharma.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I got
well,
what
I
you're
just
saying.
want to clarify so people can
Go ahead,
like,
go ahead. Do your thing. Go ahead.
No, like big pharma, big oil, you know, like insurance. Like they're like, what's happening right now is so many Americans are learning the ways in which what they thought government was, it is not, right? And so one of those things is the very 1+1 way that corporations affect government in corrupt ways. And one of those ways is they donate, and then there's a quid pro quo.
There it is. There it is. Yeah, because the whole Elon thing is making more people see, whoa, you mean to tell me someone who's not actually a politician can just walk in there and do that stuff? And here's a perfect example of this. And I don't know if people saw this, but to Amanda's point, listen to this. Shout out to Case Study. Stephen A. Smith is asking Hakeem Jeffries, how is he going to push back on the extreme left members of the party? See what I mean? They don't want you there. Listen.
Anybody worth their salt will tell you the extreme left had a lot to do with pulling y'all back from the momentum one would argue you had, obviously, in 2020. What about pushing back against your own party?
Well,
what momentum? Bernie Sanders had the most momentum in 2020. Right. So Stephen A. Smith, I want to point this out. Stephen A. Smith is, has been very critical of the Democratic Party, but I think people assume he's like some lefty. Stephen A. Smith is not a lefty. He's very clear about this. He's independent. He's a middle of the road kind of guy. He's not far left. He's not far right, et cetera. And I don't know if we want to use the far terms, but he's not going in that direction. He obviously is not even in agreement with the progressives or so-called progressives that are in Congress, which is probably why Hakeem Jeffries did this show. And if you have not watched it, please watch my expose on Hakeem Jeffries, who he is, where he came from, and how he got that congressional seat. It's on my channel. It's called Hakeem Jeffries Exposed. So check that out. Now listen to this.
An extreme left protest me more than they protest Donald Trump. Because literally, wherever I go. So I think in part because I've declined, I've refused, I've chosen not to bend the knee to either people on the far left and certainly not to Donald Trump in the far right.
He chose not to do that when he took that money from AIPAC and some of these other lobby interest groups that have put money into his pocket. That's when he made that decision. He's out here talking about he made these decisions on his own. The money that he took made those decisions for him.
All have a responsibility to serve the people we were elected to represent and the country and the Constitution. And I certainly have not been bashful and will not be bashful in disagreeing with people who are trying to take this country in a direction that doesn't lift everybody up, whether that comes from the right or whether that comes from the far left.
So he says this as, people not trying to lift everybody up, but the progressives wanted to lift everybody up, right? Isn't that why the whole idea of the universal policies, that's what that was about, was to lift everybody up. So he kind of tells on himself there. But to Amanda's point, you see what's happening here. That party is not going to change. And I think people are going to continue to spin these wheels and this strategy and keep telling you, oh, just get in there and fight. And they're going to fight for us and da-da-da. Some because they make money off of it. Some because they make money off of it. And some are going to do that because they want that to happen. But just because you want something to happen doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. So I think Amanda is correct on that point. And I think Don Lemon needed to hear that. Now, answer this question. Do you think that they would have had this conversation if Don Lemon was still hosting his show on CNN? You think Amanda Seales would have been able to come on and have this conversation with him and be just as frank as she wants to be? Think about that. All right, let's go to some of the comments here. Karen says there is no extreme left in that party. Oh my God. Let's go to other comments here. Thank you, Wasim. Canada also has many parties: Liberal Party, center neoliberal, Conservative Party, NDP, Socialist, and the Green Party and the People's Party, far right. Interesting. Thank you, Tim. Amanda has been based on Gaza, period. Yes, she has. Thank you, Ophelia. BlackRock and Rothschild Bank are partners. Rothschild created Israel. Interesting. We've had that conversation before. Thank you, Empire. France was reborn in a real revolution. We were born in a genocide. Damn. That was deep, Empire. Thank you, Tim. Because we have ops like Bernie funnel people back to the Dems. Thank you for that. Thank you, EcoPup. You can't change a corrupt party. AOC sold out. Thank you for that. Let's get that comment there on Rumble. Thank you. Thank you, Wild Rose. Sabby. Very good question. Thank you. All right. We are moving on to the next story, guys. We are almost done with the stories, and then we will dive into the call-in. So go ahead and smash the like. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're diving into this epic freaking speech. Economist Jeffrey Sachs, I'd also say he's an activist in some way, shape, or form. He endorsed Jill Stein for president in 2024. He had the opportunity to speak at the EU Parliament. And I would say school them, go through a history lesson with them, set it to their face. And I have tremendous respect when people do this. Jeffrey Sachs went right to the source and said it to their face. You got to check this out, guys. He does not want these wars to happen. He wants the war in Ukraine to end. He doesn't like what Israel has done. He's against all of those things. Listen to what he says here.
So the NATO enlargement, as you know, started in 1999 with Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. And Russia was extremely unhappy about it. But these were countries still far from the border. And Russia protested, but of course to no avail. Then George Bush Jr. came in. When 9/11 occurred, President Putin pledged all support. And then the U.S. Decided in September 20th, 2001, that it would launch 7 wars in 5 years.
Once again, who was the aggressor, right? This is not, you're not going to hear this on MSNBC or Fox News or CNN. Again, who was the aggressor? The United States. I remember when the Czech Republic was Czechoslovakia, right? And they split off.
And you can listen to General Wesley Clark online talk about that. He was NATO's supreme commander in 1999. He went to the Pentagon on September 20th, 2001. He was handed the paper explaining 7 wars. These, by the way, were Netanyahu's wars. The idea was partly to clean up old Soviet allies and partly to take out supporters of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Netanyahu's wars. Does everybody see who's been running the show now? And we were talking about this one time before. 7 wars that were Netanyahu's wars that were launched by the United States. Again, who has been the aggressor? Take him to school, Jeff.
Because Netanyahu's idea was there will be one state, thank you, only one state. It will be Israel. Israel will control all of the territory. And anyone that objects, we will overthrow. Not we exactly, our friend, the United States. That's U.S. policy until this morning. We don't know whether it will change. Now, the only wrinkle is that maybe the U.S. will own Gaza instead of Israel owning Gaza. But the idea has been around at least for 25 years. It actually goes back to a document called Clean Break that Netanyahu and his American political team put together in 1996 to end the idea of the two-state solution.
That part right there. Let's take a quick look at that document so you can see what that looks like, because this is the part where I think a lot of people are not aware of that clean break strategy. We're just going to highlight a couple of things here. The contents right here. The introduction specifically proposes 3 new policies rather than pursuing a comprehensive peace with the entire Arab world. Israel should work jointly with Jordan and Turkey to contain, destabilize, and roll back those entities that are threats to all 3. 2, changing the nature of relations with the Palestinians, specifically reserving the right of hot pursuit anywhere within Palestinian territory, as well as attempting to promote alternatives to Arafat's leadership. And 3, changing relations with the United States, stressing self-reliance and strategic cooperation. This can only be done if Israel takes serious steps to terminate aid, which prevents economic reform. Okay, I want to show everybody that. And now let's go back to what Jeffrey Sachs was saying. As we told you before, this was all planned.
You can also find it online. So these are projects. These are long-term events. These aren't, is it Clinton? Is it Bush? Is it Obama? That's the boring way to look at American politics, as the day-to-day game. But that's not what American politics is. As you know, Viktor Yanukovych was elected in 2010 on the platform of neutrality. Russia had no territorial interests or designs in Ukraine at all. I know. I was there during these years.
That part. Look at the expression on this gentleman's face right next to him. This is Michael Von Deer. Look at the expression on his face. He was there. He was there. So are people going to call Jeffrey Sachs a Putin puppet too? Someone who was there. What have we been telling you guys for so long? Bernie Sanders is out there right now acting like full-blown neocon, mad and telling people, no, we can't end the war in Ukraine. The fuck is wrong with you? They don't want you to know the truth. This is crazy. It's insane. But you have someone who was actually there.
What Russia was negotiating was a 25-year lease to 2042 for Sevastopol Naval Base. That's it. Not for Crimea, not for the Donbass, nothing like that. This idea that Putin is reconstructing the Russian Empire, this is childish propaganda. Excuse me. If anyone knows the day-to-day and year-to-year history, this is childish stuff. Childish stuff seems to work better than adult stuff. So no designs at all. The United States decided this man must be overthrown. It's called a regime change operation. Yep. There have been about 100 of them by the United States, many in your countries, and many all over the world. That's what the CIA does for a living. Okay? Please know it. It's a very unusual kind of foreign policy. But in America, if you don't like the other side, you don't negotiate with them, you try to overthrow them.
That's what we've been doing for years. Gaddafi, right? We can go through a list of another ones. You can disagree and dislike people like Saddam Hussein. You can disagree and dislike people like Gaddafi, but you do not have the right to overthrow a leader of another country. And the US government has been doing that, and it destabilizes those countries. This has been going on for years. And you have all these people, again, we talked about propaganda. All these people have been propagandized that you have to get out there and support Ukraine, and Russia is such this evil, evil country. A lot of people are just, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they're misled and misinformed. And the reality is, pay attention. The media, they're the ones that lead this. If you're talking about war or you're talking about conflict, why is the media only interviewing one side of that conflict? Why does people like Tucker Carlson have to go to Russia to get Vladimir Putin's side of that conflict? Why isn't corporate media talking to both sides? Why are they only talking to Zelensky? These are things you want to pay attention to.
Preferably covertly. If it doesn't work covertly, you do it overtly. You always say it's not our fault. They're the aggressor. They're the other side. They're Hitler. That comes up every 2 or 3 years. Whether it's Saddam Hussein, whether it's Assad, whether it's Putin, that's very convenient. That's the only foreign policy explanation the American people are ever given anywhere. Well, we're facing Munich 1938. Well, we're facing Munich 1938. Can't talk to the other side. They're evil, implacable foes. That's the only model of foreign policy we ever hear from our mass media. And the mass media repeats it entirely because it's completely suborned by the U.S. government. I begged the Ukrainians, and I had a track record with the Ukrainians. I advised the Ukrainians. I'm not anti-Ukrainian, I'm pro-Ukrainian completely. I said, save your lives, save your sovereignty, save your territory, be neutral. Don't listen to the Americans. I repeated to them the famous adage of Henry Kissinger, that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. Okay, so let me repeat that for Europe. To be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal.
Oh, God. Words to live by. You really don't want to get in that type of proximity with the United States government, because once you are a friend with the United States, then you pretty much have to follow what the U.S. does. And the moment you try not to, oh, we're just going to throw sanctions on you too. That's why all these other countries, you know, it's like all these other countries that some of them probably wanted to withhold arms from Israel, but the reality is they're up under the thumb of the United States. And no one really wants to step out there like that. Oh, we're friends, we're buddies, we got this agreement. Saudi Arabia is supposed to be friends with the United States, and like they also, you know, want to look at BRICS as well. They also want to, you know, try to do deals with Russia and China and all these other countries too. And it's like the US government is like, no, you belong to us. Not a country you want to get close to.
Trump does not want the losing hand. This is why it is more likely than not this war will end, because Trump and President Putin will agree to end the war. If Europe does all its great warmongering, it doesn't matter. The war is ending. So get it out of your system. Please tell your colleagues. It's over.
There it is.
And it's over because Trump doesn't want to carry a loser. That's it. It's not some great morality. He doesn't want to carry a loser. This is a loser. The one that will be saved by the negotiations taking place right now is Ukraine. Second is Europe. Your stock market's rising in recent days by the horrible news of negotiations. I know this has been met with the sheer horror in these chambers, but this is the best news that you could get. Now, I encouraged, they don't listen to me. but I tried to reach out to some of the European leaders. Most don't want to hear anything from me at all. But I said, don't go to Kiev. Go to Moscow. Discuss with your counterparts. Are you kidding? You're Europe. You're 450 million people. You're $20 trillion economy. You should be the main economic trading partner of Russia. It's natural links. By the way, if anyone would like to discuss how the U.S. blew up Nord Stream, I'd be happy to talk about that.
Dropping bombs left and right. He is dropping bombs left and right. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to bring in the music for this one. Woo! Nord Stream. Pipeline. And we're taking it back. I had to drop the beat for that one, you guys. I had to drop it.
On the Middle East, by the way, the U.S. completely handed over foreign policy to Netanyahu 30 years ago. The Israel lobby dominates American politics. Just have no doubt about it. I could explain for hours how it works. It's very dangerous. I'm hoping that Trump will not destroy his administration and worse, the Palestinian people, because of Netanyahu, who I regard as a war criminal, properly indicted by the ICC, and that needs to be told no more, that there will be a state of Palestine on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, according to international law, as the only way for peace. It's the only way for Europe to have peace on your borders with the Middle East, is the two-state solution. There is only one obstacle to it, by the way, and that is the veto of the United States in the UN Security Council. So if you want to have some influence, tell the United States, drop the veto. You are together with 180 countries in the world. The only ones that oppose a Palestinian state are the United States, Israel, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Mr. Malay, and Paraguay.
This is a good point. Lana said that guy watching him, though. I know. Look at how he's looking at him. He's just like he's right up in, It's just interesting the way that he is looking at Jeffrey Sachs as though I cannot fathom. It's just like, great Scott, I cannot fathom what he is saying. The words is coming out of his mouth. This is funny.
So this is a place where Europe could have a big influence. Europe has gone silent about the JCPOA and Iran. Netanyahu's greatest dream in life is a war between the United States and Iran. He's not given up, and it's not impossible that that would come also. And that's because the U.S. in this regard does not have an independent foreign policy. It is run by Israel. It's tragic. It's amazing, by the way. And it could end. Trump may say that he wants foreign policy back. Maybe. I'm hoping that it's the case. Finally, let me just say with respect to China, China is not an enemy. China is just a success story. That's why it is viewed by the United States.
Throw it up one more time. We got to drop the beat. It's not an enemy. It's in the street. Hey. Yes, for me. Yes, for me. this out. He went over there to Europe and told them and gave them the business. That's what he did. He went over there and gave them the business.
As an enemy, because China is a bigger economy than the United States. Russia is not going to invade Europe. This is the fundamental point. It may get up to the Dnieper River. It's not going to invade Europe. But there are real issues. The main issue for Russia was the United States, because Russia, as a major power and the largest nuclear power in the world, was profoundly concerned about U.S. unipolarity from the beginning. Now that this is seemingly, possibly ending, Europe has to open negotiations directly with Russia as well.
Yep.
Because the United States will quickly lose interest, and you're going to be living with Russia for the next thousands of years.
I'll stop it there. Please go watch the full address for the sake of time. I do have one more thing here, but for the sake of time, I'll stop it there. Please watch the full interview. But that was awesome of Jeffrey Sachs to do that, to go over there to Europe and say, listen, let me tell you what is really going on and what I think you guys need to do. I think he has a point when he says that, like, you guys have got, he's basically telling them they got to step up, that they can't continue to be puppets of the United States government. They really got to step up and say, you know what? We don't want World War III either. You're going to have to do it, because as you keep going along with the U.S. government, you're going to be heading right down the toilet. And this is what needs to be done. Protect Jeffrey. Roger Meadows says, well, it's been nice knowing you, Jeff. No, but protect Jeffrey Sachs. You know, obviously, again, he is taking a risk by doing that, but he went over there and he said what needed to be said. So in the theme of two things can be true at the same time, we've discussed this multiple times on this show. Yes, it can be true that Russia invaded Ukraine, but it can also be true that Russia was provoked. He just went through all the things that happened prior to that about Russia being provoked. The U.S. government, NATO was not supposed to expand further to Russia after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we have to be real here. And then also, Europe is going to have to stand up and push back. They really are. Like, you guys have got to stop just sitting back saying, well, we're all a part of NATO. Bump NATO, man. Bump NATO. Don't know NATO. And I'm not trying to know NATO, okay? NATO should now be that friend that you kick out that's been mooching off of you. The friend who is there and doesn't want to work, don't want to do anything, and wants you to just take care of them. NATO is that friend, and it's time for you to kick them out. That's just how I see it. These countries are going to have to grow a spine, and they're going to have to stand up. And he brought up a really good point. He talked about, like, them actually having some type of trade with China. That's an interesting point for him to bring up. Why don't they have that? Because they're in that relationship with the U.S., because they're friends with the U.S. government. Hopefully, we can see a change here. Hopefully. If the war in Ukraine, and listen to this, guys, and for the newbies, gotta say this because people like to take things out of context. I did not vote for Trump. I did not vote for Kamala. I voted for Jill Stein. But I will say this. If Donald Trump ends this war in Ukraine, do you guys realize he could probably get a Nobel Peace Prize? Because they could say, well, that stopped us from heading towards World War III. And also, it shows you that Kamala and Biden could have done the same thing. Let's go to some of the comments here. And we have one more story to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. Ravina said, I sent this speech to so many people yesterday. Even my auntie who pays zero attention to politics, LOL. That's awesome. Tim says, Europe rulers are just US, UK puppets. Blame anyone by the puppet master. Thank you, Wasim. I heard Trump advisor Peter Navarro is pushing to try to push Canada out of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. That's the US, UK, NZ, and Australia. And that's New Zealand. Don't think it will happen as King Charles is head of state. Interesting. Interesting. And thank you for this, Wasim. Although would love Canada to get out of that alliance. This is interesting. Thank you, Focus. Sabby is the best. Well, thank you, Focus. And now we're going to focus on our last story here. Again, we are doing call-in after the show, so stay tuned for that. Smash the like if you haven't already done so. And this is probably one of the craziest stories I'm about to get into because shit just got real. Okay. In the spirit of two things can be true at the same time, there is new information about the Diddy case that could change everything. Everything. First, let's walk through what we missed. Let's go to the beginning of what we just missed. I'm not going to go through the whole, like when he got arrested, we did all that. But the past couple of days, things have been changing and it's like, wait a minute. So first and foremost, Diddy filed a lawsuit against NBC for $100 million over a new documentary. So I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but NBC does have a new documentary about him. It says here that he's suing NBC Universal over documentary that says it falsely accuses him of being a serial murderer who had sex with underage girls as he awaits trial on federal sex trafficking charges. I have not seen this documentary, and I'm always very cautious when a network or, a filmmaker is going to create a documentary about someone who's currently on trial and they haven't been convicted yet. Right? They already did this with Luigi, and you see this happening with Diddy right now. So he is suing them about that. So that happened. Okay. Now, again, it's called Diddy Making of a Bad Boy. Not kidding, you guys. It was filed that Wednesday in New York State Court. It says that it included statements that NBC Universal either knew were false or published with reckless disregard for the truth in order to defame the founder of Bad Boy Records. So that happened. Then this happened. Diddy's lawyer quits defense team. Under no circumstances can I continue. So when I saw this, I was just kind of like, whoa, that don't look good for Diddy. That does not sound good for you at all. Right? So this is Anthony Rico. He submitted a motion seeking to withdraw from the case. Now, this was February 21st. We're walking through because, like I said, a lot has happened in these past couple of days. So I figure I compile this as just one story. Anthony Rico did not provide a reason for his request. Under no circumstances could I continue to effectively serve as counsel for Sean Combs. Didn't give a reason. A judge will need to grant Rico's motion before he is officially removed from the case. Combs would still have 5 other attorneys defending him in his federal sex trafficking case, including lead counsel Mark Agnifilio. So for Anthony Rico to step down, that was a big one. Now, there are rumors, and I say rumors, it's been alleged that there's a thing going around on TikTok that the reason why that lawyer stepped aside is because he didn't want to deal with necromancy. Like they were trying to say that Diddy was involved in necromancy allegedly. And we don't know that to be true. I'm just letting you know, be careful with some of those videos that are just going around. We don't know that to be true. And Anthony Rico has not confirmed that. So just FYI. But that's not even the kicker of the kicks. This is Diddy's lawyers challenged the search warrants and they aim to suppress evidence in the new filing. Holy smokes. We have a new situation here where his team of lawyers have an issue with the search warrants that were used against Diddy. So this is going all the way back, but this is new information. And let's get into this. Now, I don't know, but if this holds up, ladies and gentlemen, we could see a whole different thing unfold. Evidence federal prosecutors obtained through searches of Sean Diddy Combs' home in LA and Miami and elsewhere must be suppressed because the warrants that authorized those searches were unconstitutional. Defense attorneys argued Sunday in a new court filing. Oh my God. His lawyers are saying that the search warrants that were obtained in the very beginning when they searched his homes before he was arrested, they are saying that those search warrants were unconstitutional. And because those search warrants are unconstitutional, that means that the evidence will have to be suppressed. And if the evidence is going to be suppressed, then that means, let's go a little bit further. As you'll see here, it says the defense argued the warrant applications for the Diddy houses, iCloud accounts, phones, and hotel room were overbroad, excluded facts that could have been favorable to Combs, and presented a grossly distorted picture of reality. Oh, snap. The heavily redacted defense motion does not publicly reveal the specifics of what the prosecutors allegedly omitted, but it said the warrant applications eliminated important context that the magistrate judge who approved them should have seen, including about a certain witness that the defense contended had reason to fabricate and embellish. OMG. This act here, if true, this technicality, I guess that's what we can call it, could change this entire case. If you don't have the search warrant, you don't have the evidence. If you don't have the evidence, you don't have the case. And it just, I don't even know. I don't even know which side people are on this thing. But he must have one hell of a team of lawyers to be able to point this out. Don't forget, Luigi Mangioni's lawyer is also pointing to issues with the search and seizure of Luigi Mangione when he was at that McDonald's. So here's another one with this situation that we see as well. It goes on to say, but it worked. The government got its warrants, leaked damaging information, and then executed its military-style raids at Combs' residences. Here, rather than giving the reviewing magistrate a fair summary, the government hid exculpatory evidence to bolster its case. This is bad, you guys. Like, this looks bad. It goes on to say the defense said that some of the most salacious details recounted in the search warrants applications came from an unnamed producer whose accusations were never credible. What producer one told investigators is redacted, but the defense said he had relayed stories about time working for Sean Diddy Combs. So here we go. Here, the motion said the government does not plan to call producer one to testify. The motion sought to suppress all evidence obtained through these searches or grant a hearing to examine the government's conduct in obtaining the warrants. No comment from federal prosecutors who will instead offer a formal reply in court papers. Again, he is pleading not guilty. So here's the thing, guys. Sometimes when they really, really, really want to get someone and it's like, you're like, okay, I know this guy did this, right? Like if you are, I don't know, like detective or whatever, investigators, you may know that they did it, but you don't have enough evidence for the arrest, right? So sometimes what will happen is you will bend the rules to be able to get what you want. So oftentimes what happens is like, it's like they didn't follow procedure. It says here that those search warrants were unconstitutional. So they were willing to break the rules or bend the rules so that they can get the information that they needed to put him away. But these types of things come back to bite you in the ass. And that's what's happening right now. It reminds me of how Bill Cosby was able to, get off because of that technicality. It's things like that. And when you're going after people that are this high up in the business, and there's people higher up than him, but when you're going after someone like him or, anyone in that particular position, if all your ducks are not lined up in a row, this whole thing could fall apart. What I'm trying to say to you is, if those search warrants were unconstitutional and his defense team is they're able to prove that, then they're able to suppress the evidence. Then you don't have that evidence for the trial. You can't present that evidence in court. That evidence is not admissible in court. And if it's not, then do you really have a case? Crazy stuff, guys. And again, two things can be true at the same time. It could be true that he's guilty, but it could also be true that those search warrants were unconstitutional, that they didn't follow the rules that they were supposed to follow to get them. All right, guys, we are going to do call in. So I'm going to take a quick break. Eric's going to pop on for a couple of minutes. I'll be back and then we'll jump into call in. Yep.
All right. Sounds good. Excuse me. Yeah. All right. So this is the part of the show where we give Sabby a little break. Excuse me. And hopefully there's not too much of a frog in my throat. I'll start with a bit of water. And yeah, with the Diddy thing, yeah, it'll be I guess it'll end up being up to a judge, because they do that thing where they where they look at it and then a judge decides what was there an illegal search, and then it goes to like and then it probably goes into appeals and whatnot. And I mean, that's the thing that happens. And by the way, hello to everyone out there. A few people saying hi. It's oh yeah, with Diddy, I mean, the rich people, what you see is they're what I say is that they're getting the defense, the type of defense that everyone should get. But of course, they have access to the best lawyers and get that. But it is one of the things we need in our legal system, I think, is to kind of even up those disparities, as we would call them. All right. Yeah, so we'll be transitioning over to the Zoom Hangout, or that we also call Call-In, because it used to be the Call-In app, and that's where we can hear what you think, what you got to say. Sabby is setting up, is creating the room in Zoom as we speak here during this break, and then we'll be giving you the link, and we'll set it up on sabbysabs2.com to make it easy to get to. But in the meantime, let's look. We got a couple of super chats here. Thanks for this one from H. Dennis, who says, "Are we protesting Trump's aggressive Palestine stance?" I mean, in general, we should be. I mean, I think the key thing should be demand. Our demands, which I'm going to be talking about here for a minute. I think our core demand when it comes to Israel-Palestine should be justice and equality for the Palestinians. And, that needs to be the bedrock of it. That needs to be the core thing that that's not negotiable, and then go from there. And when you start at that point, that you have a very different picture than what we tend to see. And what we see is that the uniparty has no interest in that. The uniparty is there to serve the billionaires and military industrial complex and those things. And so it's going to be up to us to have that kind of demand and to literally get in the streets to make it happen. Thanks for the super chat, Rosemary Farr, who says Jeffrey Sachs' full speech to the EU is powerful. I couldn't believe he said the quiet part out loud. Professor Sachs is a true patriot. So are you, Sabby. Keep up the good work. Thanks for those kind words and super chat from Rosemary. And yeah, definitely agree. Jeffrey Sachs getting out there and saying that the things he does is very good to see, very powerful, and glad it's happening. Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to connect in is that there is a new, let me bring this up here, a new 11 Demands Substack post, which I wanted to highlight and say a little bit about. Hey, where'd it go? Sorry, just getting the right screen stuff up here. There it is. So the title and idea of this one is 11 Demands Needs Heroes. And here, I'm going to put this in the chat as well. But the idea is like, what can we all do? How can this whole thing work? All right, there it is in the chat as well. But yeah, on the 11 Demands Substack, it's connected to the 11 demands, and we have I encourage you if you're interested in all this stuff to sign up for it. You can get updates and things like this. So I can even pump this up a little larger. Here we go. So yeah, the billionaires, they have immense wealth and power, at their disposal. They're not shy about using it to advance their interests. You have the interests of them, the billionaires, the top 1%, and you have the interests of the 99%. And those are very different things. So as the 99%, we have the power of numbers, but that power and these demands are only going to get somewhere if the millions of people can get on the same page. And what I'm proposing and putting out there is the idea of getting behind a core set of principles or a clear set of demands, a set of clear demands, and be concise. And so the key challenge here, right, is how do we inspire millions of people to actually get together, and actually get mobilized, get inspired, and actually get in the streets over this stuff, which is, to me, is the only way, this real change is going to happen. And I'd say it starts with calling out the money and the corruption. And it's an issue, everyone agrees on this, right? You ask anybody, our government, our economic system, the corporate media, it's corrupt. But we need to do more than just call that out. Right, then you have to get to the next step in that. What is the demand, right? And so that's crucial. And then and the demand is to get rid of the corruption, to deal with the money. And when you call out something in that fashion, when you get to the demand in MCDS, that leads you to the solution. Because if you're going to get the money out of the system, that leads you to things like public financing of elections, to things like fixing the Constitution so money is not speech, corporations are not people. Things like, even with corporate media, breaking up these companies and having real control over corporate media, and even into the further things beyond that of like cooperative ownership and things like that. So what we got here is then what I say next is that's where you come in. It's the concept here is, 11 Demands Needs Heroes. Whether you're a podcaster or you're an online commenter in a chat, or if you're just talking with friends, always frame the discussion in terms of money and corruption. And then, crucially, always take it into demands, which will then take you into the solutions. And this is what MCDS and the concept of an 11 demands collective are all about. So if you got a problem, if you're seeing a problem out there, turn it into a demand. And if you want content for that, feel free to copy and paste from the 11 demands list. And here are like some examples where the demands come out of the list. So you have a problem. Our healthcare system sucks. The demand is implement a United States healthcare system with quality healthcare for everyone, and not just be demanding or compromise like Medicare for all. You want to be demanding big. Problem, the billionaires and bankers are calling the shots. The demand, fix the big money in politics and government. If you have Black wealth inequality, demand cash reparations for ADOS. Is that debt owed? You have both parties cutting taxes to the wealthy. Demand, go big. Demand, we abolish all taxes except highly progressive income taxes, wealth taxes, and taxes on large corporations. And I'll just skip ahead a little and finish with, we have this issue, and people were calling for a general strike. Yeah, strong agree, but strikes need demands. And so to have that general strike, it's going to start with having a clear set of concise and easy to understand demands. So every discussion of every major issue should finish with MCDS, the money, corruption, demand solutions. Any discussion that doesn't finish there is a missed opportunity. The end game is to reach a critical mass of people thinking this way and demanding an end to the corruption, a broad movement that is too big to ignore. It's up to us to be the spark. So do you want to be an 11 demands hero is kind of the call to action here. So for this particular post, I put it in the chat, and you can check out 11 Demands Substack, and let's see what we can do towards actually finishing this mess. But kind of the conclusion I reached is we're going to have to do it ourselves.
There you go.
Tyranny and no one in these uniparties certainly is going to do it for us.
No, they are not. Okay, we are heading over to call in, ladies and gentlemen, again. So the link is pinned at the top of the chat for you newbies, older people, older folks of the show. They know this, but the link is pinned at the top. I'm going to go ahead and open that Zoom while I'm on the show. All I ask is that when you join, please mute your mic, please. We all ask that everyone does that. And if you want to speak, the way that you do so, at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, there's an option to raise your hand. You click on raise your hand, and that's how I know that you want to speak. But in the meantime, please go ahead and mute when you enter. Thank you very much. And Eric, I'll go ahead and make you a co-host. All right. And if you join the show after the stream has ended, the live chat is not accessible immediately. That's just a YouTube thing, but you can still get that link on sabrinasalvati.com to join the call-in portion of the show, where we get to hear from all of you guys, which I love to do. That again, that's
right, we'll see you in the call-in.
All right. All righty, guys, I will see you there. And it looks like, again, people don't need the passcode. They're able to join. So again, just sabrinasalvati.com, and that will bring you into the Zoom. All right, guys, that is it for me tonight. I will be live again Thursday evening with Lee Camp. So don't miss that. He has a pretty cool announcement. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.